Chapter 81. The Convert 2. They soon exchanged glances and smiled, imagining Drake stammering and apologizing. The two were roughly experiencing the catharsis sensation that would exist hundreds of years later. However, you speak of my shameful and ugly past. No, I wasn't trying to point it out. I was just concerned. Aren't you referring to the time when I was ugly, dirty, unscrupulous, and obsessed with the wealth and pleasure that slaughter provides? What? They had underestimated Drake too much. Drake suddenly bowed his head deeply, and just as actors in the 21st century often do on variety shows, he suddenly dropped a tear. I will go to hell. A sinner like me deserves to die. No, that's not what Your Majesty, no. No matter how hard I try to do good deeds, it's as useless as mixing honey with poison. I know too. Since the Lord sees everything, I too will someday pay for this sin. Don't say that. Sin is a matter for later. But for now, aren't you doing righteous deeds? Now that I hear it, indeed, since I've brought 353 Africans, I'll only take about 2 kilograms of aluminum. In that moment, Raleigh and Vicente looked at each other and came to an agreement on one conclusion. How great a sinner they themselves were, they honestly didn't know. But the man before them was simply a lump of sin. What a transparent human. I gave Drake a few kilograms of aluminum and saw him off. Looking at that innocent smile, he seems like a child. But what kind of child commits murder and arson as if it's nothing? Anyway, a person whose trustworthiness had decreased to -255 coming out like this caused an underflow, instead raising his trustworthiness to 0. If they can't be a believer with conviction and strength on my side, maybe it's better to have someone who transparently flies around following money and status like this. In any case, Drake has been doing a good job here and there, so already 500 slaves have been freed. Of those, about 150 had nowhere to go and stayed in our community. Not a bad outcome. If I can save hundreds of people with just a bit of crumpled aluminum foil. The problem isn't that. I wonder if I've been too meddlesome. I worry that Drake's piracy might become even more rampant, causing Spain to adopt an attitude like, "Where is that bastard's base? Virginia? Attack it immediately." And although slave trading wasn't a major industry in England, there would still be slave traders, and I wonder if they would oppose Drake's actions. This might create diplomatic problems, but still, how can a person just leave this alone? And establishing a connection with Drake like this will surely have its uses later. After all, isn't he like the supreme commander of the English Navy? His public recognition is considerable. Anyway, judging from Spain's lack of response for years, they probably won't harm us or react differently. And in England, they won't abandon a honeypot like me just because a few slave traders are grumbling. England, well, they'll handle it well. Drake knew exactly what to do with this pure aluminum he had obtained. Indeed, it was befitting of a man who had been raised among pirates since childhood and learned the principles of power in his teens. He lives in a country of pirates and organized crime. In times like these, one should not be stingy in paying tribute. That was the difference between him and other insignificant pirate gangs that didn't make it into history. He knew how to catch the eye of the boss. And so, having received the tribute, Boss Elizabeth decided to continue her political offensive from here. Tighten the belt a bit more. I need to show a resolute impression. Yes, Your Majesty. Soon, the political show with Drake begins. Before entering the court, Elizabeth slowly reconsiders the current situation in her mind. What is the current situation in England? Originally, it was indescribably bad. Until the war, they had lived by continuously hitting the money bag called Spain and extorting massive wealth in return. But now Spain says it won't just take it anymore. Because of that, funds have run out first. For war, ships are needed, and for ships, timber is needed. But the forests within England have almost been depleted. That means everything is imported. The treasury is completely emptied by buying timber and ships at expensive prices from Sweden and Denmark, then patching up the empty treasury with piracy, then buying timber and ships lost in piracy again. The royal budget is in deficit every year, and the entire country wobbles with the success or failure of one or two piracy missions. In the midst of this, salvation approached. Virginia. Luxury goods regularly come in from the Virginia colony established in the native emperor's domain, and through those luxury goods, enormous profits are collected from the nobles. At the same time, since the Virginia colony has started operating shipyards, it seems they will soon escape from timber and ship shortages. Even the food situation has improved. This was the moment when various problems making England creak were being washed away. Of course, does this mean that England's national wealth is being drained by importing luxury goods from Virginia and the native emperor? Not that either. They buy massive amounts of sugar, spices, and woolen fabrics. Plus. A strange fruit from near Africa. Coffee, was it? When Raleigh brought it, saying it was the native emperor's request, both Raleigh and the Queen floundered for a long time not knowing what it was. Only recently were they able to supply it to the Virginia colony, so the gold flowing out to Virginia has been significantly reduced. So to summarize, the Virginia colony and the native emperor beyond it are the highest priority ally for England, filling the treasury and supplying strategic materials. Moreover, he is hostile to Spain. Then the conclusion was clear. The emperor's condemnation of slavery is a signal to plunder Spain together. Chapter 82. The Convert, 3. Indeed, a thought worthy of a pirate boss. Bam! Her Majesty is entering. As Elizabeth entered the court, people bowed their heads and Drake, standing in the middle, also lowered his head. Elizabeth, as previously agreed, spoke to him with trembling hands and tears. So, this is the gift we received from our ally across the sea. Yes, Your Majesty. And it was obtained in exchange for releasing poor slaves. That is correct. At Drake's words, Elizabeth joined her hands in prayer and slowly dropped a tear. I have always wished. At her words, everyone in the court fell silent. I have always wished for all the people of this land to escape from a slave-like state and live as free people walking on those green fields. Indeed, that was Elizabeth's true desire. Because it is the will of Christ, the freedom and liberation of her subjects. As the ruler of the Kingdom of England, as the head of the Church of England, and as a Christian, it was what she had earnestly wished for. It was absolutely not because the aluminum Drake brought could be converted into several times its weight in gold. Of course, it was also not because they could no longer sell slaves to the Spanish colonies, which had been their biggest customers. Similarly, it was not national propaganda either. These are all petty slanders by Spanish spies against England and its queen. Or they might not be. But whether it was reading my will in advance or not, our ally across the sea has given me, no, all our soul's great inspiration, has he not? Indeed it is so, Your Majesty. Yes, indeed it is so. Slavery is the greatest sin invented by humans, and the most horrific act of rebellion against God. And as you all know, the Spanish are still enslaving countless natives and Africans. That's right, Your Majesty. Those words are true. At this moment, Elizabeth Tudor, who had tasted juicy profits and invested in the slave trade multiple times, died. Also, Elizabeth Tudor, who employed Moorish servants with dark skin, who don't receive wages, but are absolutely not slaves, died. And when she opened her eyes again in tears, look, an angel suddenly appeared, cured London's plague, and now a Christian barbarian is helping us without any compensation. Why does such luck only happen to England and not to Spain? It's because we are righteous. We will triumph in this righteous war. We will crush the evil practice of slavery. From now on, slavery will be permanently prohibited in all lands where the rule of the English monarch extends. She was now reborn as Emancipator Elizabeth I, and Elizabeth's Moorish servant, for the first time in a very long time, or rather for the first time since coming to England, received something called wages. Thus, Sir Drake's fleet set out again for the Caribbean Sea with full support, to kill more Spaniards, to burn more Spanish homes, to extort more Spanish property.
Actually, no.
to liberate more Spanish slaves. If anyone disagreed with this opinion, they were clearly Spanish or their spies. Although we have invested in the slave trade several times, we could not overcome our conscience and withdrew from it. What nonsense is this? And the Spaniards, upon encountering the holy declaration of the English queen, also became angry. Didn't that woman quit investing just because there was no profitability? That was correct. To be precise, wasn't it because she felt awkward about smuggling slaves into our colonies? That was also correct. And she says we're the devil's minions? Because we buy and sell slaves. And reaching the conclusion, everyone was angry. How morally superior do they think they are? They're the ones who make their living by burning and plundering other people's colonies. And yet they... See, calm down, everyone. Isn't the issue of their Virginia colony more important? That Francis Drake character has set up base there and is plundering us, so we need measures. That's right. How much has that Virginia colony grown? We can't even overthrow it with our power. What measures are you talking about? To be precise, it wasn't that they lacked the power to deal with it. Spanish King Philip II possesses far greater wealth and power than Elizabeth of England and her ilk. This is even more evident considering that England, which records perpetual deficits, is surviving by sucking Spain's wealth. However, the powerful might of the Spanish Empire must be projected worldwide. It must be used by the king to suppress domestic great nobles, to check the Pope, to stop Ottoman expansion, to suppress Protestants in Europe, and to compete for world hegemony with Habsburg relatives. England is merely an obstacle and one of many enemies in the Spanish Empire's global policy, not a major adversary. Therefore, even with its powerful might and overflowing wealth, the empire has no choice but to leave Drake's pirate gangs, like flies, and their spawning ground, the Virginia colony, alone. In the end, the method they choose remains defensive. To block England's infiltration, we must expand the Caribbean coast and Florida colony more. We need to go beyond simple mission headquarters and military bases to increase permanent settlements. That's right. Let's develop that area immediately with allied Indian tribes. But isn't there a shortage of labor? To prevent the infiltration of English colonies and the plundering of slaves, they need to strengthen the substance of their colonies. And to strengthen the substance of the colonies, import more slaves. Damn it, only the Mali Empire will be happy. It seems contradictory, but it was the only choice. They ultimately imported more slaves, and various kingdoms in West Africa, including the Mali Empire, made a fortune. And the Spanish began reclamation. I plan to build about 4 windmills. There's nothing but wetlands around here. How long will it take? Don't think about human casualties. Assuming we mobilize slaves. In that case, about 6 months? 6 months. You mean only 6 months, right? And we also need blacksmiths and iron mines. What for? Don't we need shovels? We can't ask slaves to dig soil and scoop water with their hands. Can we? Virginia colony already has thousands of people. Can we catch up? Of course, unless they're draining water without windmills. Here, an automatic water pump. Oh, if you put firewood in here, the pump will automatically run 24 hours a day without any human touch. Arg.
Alligator.
Bring the musket first. There are
No muskets.
Why? Didn't we build a forge too? Well, does metal bend and cut itself? Here, iron pipes. Is it all right to use so many? They're needed for water pump parts. But the Lord will replenish them anyway, so why worry? And please turn on the grinder. Don't we need to run the lathe? Whir. Ugh. Huff. Huff. Carry the stones. Your dedication will be the glory of His Majesty, the King of Spain. Ugh. Someone, please move the stones for us. Talk sense. You might as well say some beast with shovels for arms would build a levee. equals. Boom, 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 boom. With an excavator, it would be done in half a day. Ah, perfect. Mr. Hewitt, let's prepare the water pump first. I'll go to the factory. What is this? Who keeps calling me? Why is my ear so itchy? Anyway, there are many large and small wetlands around Chesapeake Bay, and it's difficult to place windmills everywhere to reclaim them. The so-called automatic water pump to be placed in such places. When I went to Mr. Brown's factory, all sorts of ironworkers were busily walking around, engrossed in various tasks. As I approached with the porter, not the hijet, but the porter, Mr. Brown came out and guided me. Ah, are you here for that? Yes, that's right. The place where the work is in progress. It's over there. The technology and materials needed to make automatic water pumps were varied. For example, let's look at the cylinder part, which is the most important part of the power unit. I've seen these people make muskets, but in this period, creating a cylindrical shape with metal requires tremendous skill and labor. To make a cylindrical barrel for a musket, you have no choice but to mercilessly hammer iron plates to roll them into a circular shape. After that, the whole inside is machined by inserting a core. How do you make an accurate and uniform cylinder by making it so crudely? Obviously, you can't. It was a time when I could understand why pre-modern weapons weren't standardized. Making the cylinder's tube would have to go through the same process since the shape is the same. Originally, what is this? It's an iron pipe, of course. If it weren't for an iron pipe made with 21st century technology being a consumable, that means if you just block one end of the iron pipe and wrap iron around it thickly and circularly to reinforce its strength, the cylinder is quickly completed. And with steel made with 21st century iron and steel technology at that, making the inside more precisely machined and smoothing the surroundings. First, just power this grinder. Please wait a moment. Whir. Yes, this is it. Without a lathe that transmits power through the grinder, it would have been impossible to smooth the inside of the pipe and create and polish precisely fitting parts. Anyway, when you put together a well-processed iron pipe and piston, the cylinder is complete. You drill a hole in the completed cylinder with a 21st century drill. Now that the most important cylinder part of the power unit is complete, the next step is to make the crank, boiler, and valve chamber. The method was simple. Excuse me, Nemo? I've forgotten the exact structure of the crank. The book is here. I'll copy it and post it on the wall now, so don't forget. Thank you. Referring to the 21st century biography of great people that was in the house, we set the structure of the entire power unit. Where did you put the cylinder? We need to assemble it. Bring the pipe for the valve chamber here. Since we need to create a space for gas to enter and exit inside the cylinder, we make a valve chamber with another pipe and attach it to match the hole we made in the cylinder earlier. Next, we connect the valve rod connected to the valve chamber and the piston rod connected to the piston to the crank. This converts the reciprocating motion of the piston in the cylinder into rotational motion. And when a water pump connected to the crankshaft continuously pumps water, water can be pumped without relying on manpower or animal power. I never thought living alone and having this house become like a family warehouse would benefit me like this. Books that had been collecting dust because no one had opened them since I was a child are now treasures. Especially various pictures in biographies or educational comics I read as a child, like scenes saying, "Haha, are you curious about the structure of an external combustion engine? Ah, Dr. I know it all," and so on, have shown me the light. That's not all. Excuse me, but did you bring that by any chance? Of course, it's fully loaded in my porter. As expected. Let's carry it out right now. That, the 21st century, lubricant I had hoarded. Squeak, squeak. With just this, the squeaking sounds and frictional heat disappear. Efficiency improves several times. When I brought the lubricant, the craftsmen each took an armful and sprayed it on the joints of the automatic water pumps they were repairing and inspecting. I watched them approvingly and realized anew, wow, the resource cheat is really something else. Chapter 83, Iron and Intentions 1. When will Raleigh arrive? Baron Walter Raleigh of Roanoke arrived in Plymouth a few days ago, so he should reach London within a week. Good. You may leave. I need to think. Yes, Your Majesty. Elizabeth slowly dismisses her attendant, looking at the paper on the table. And then, sigh. She falls into deep thought. Raleigh will arrive soon. Originally, Raleigh was her special pleasure. A young lover 19 years her junior, and an easily manageable favorite useful in various ways. But since the Virginia colony began serious development, his position has completely changed. A bridge between Elizabeth and the native emperor, a diplomat, the Queen's envoy. She doesn't know exactly what caused it, but according to information from various sources, it seems Raleigh has earned the emperor's favor. Therefore, going through Raleigh to contact the emperor made sense. After all, he was also the only person who regularly traveled between Virginia and England. He completely monopolized trade with Virginia. Abolishing slavery, The native emperor is clearly extending his hand to me. Since he has gone this far, she will clarify her relationship with him through Raleigh. Having welcomed him into the Christian world with a grand coronation ceremony, it's time to move forward. When she subtly tested the waters by giving Raleigh the title of Baron of Roanoke, the emperor accepted it without much resistance. Judging from that, he had clearly bestowed Roanoke Island and some small pieces of land to the English. The rest of the vast land seemed to be the emperor's territory where the English were permitted to reside, so she would frame it that way. The English would be allowed to live in his country under his protection, and the Roanoke Island area would be treated like the residence of Raleigh, dispatched as her ambassador. That's how she'll define the scope of the Virginia colony and the relationship between the two countries. As a firm alliance. He is like the Netherlands, which is fighting an independence war against Spain, in that he stands against Spain and disrupts Spanish hegemony. And he is like Sweden or Denmark, Protestant allies in the north, in that he provides strategic resources like timber and ships. Though she has never even seen the emperor's face, he is now one of her major allies. An ally against Spain, an ally supporting England's economy. Without Virginia, things would be much harder now. Even now, her head is pounding. Despite selling luxury goods from Virginia everywhere and exporting various goods to Virginia, the current trade surplus was just barely being maintained. In particular, the timber shortage was the biggest issue. England is an island nation, and what an island nation needs most during war is warships and cannons. Warships and cannons are made of timber and iron requires vast amounts of fuel to produce, so ultimately timber supply is crucial. And England's forests were depleted long ago. That's why they had been dependent on foreign imports for timber, iron ingots, and many ships. Of those, the expenditure on ships would be greatly reduced soon. They were bringing in inexpensive ships from Virginia shipyards. But iron? Iron used for farming tools, armor, and various cold weapons, as well as cannons, chains, and anchors? Still insufficient. The gold coins they earned were flowing back out to northern European countries to fill that shortage. A truly frustrating situation. Raleigh needs to come quickly. The Queen grinds her teeth, thinking, if Lawrence, who thoughtfully prepared gum painkillers and toothpaste for the Queen, could see this, she would be shocked. Displaying aversion to slavery is clearly a declaration of war against Spain. Judging from Raleigh's attitude when mentioning the emperor, the statements of the saint whom he meets every morning, and all other circumstances, he is clearly very knowledgeable about European politics. So he must have considered England's position, Spain's prosperity, the relationship between the two kingdoms, and so on, before making his proposal to Drake. Considering that England's slave trade has quieted down while Spain's slave trade is more active than ever, to build a justification for war against Spain. What other reason would he have to care about slavery across the ocean? Because he's a good person? He has clearly decided to be hostile toward Spain, and he has resolved to involve England in his war. Then she should match his rhythm. What if England provides strategic resources to him as he prepares for war? Simultaneously, a plan to solve England's iron shortage forms in the Queen's mind. Virginia has abundant timber, so they built shipyards there. Then what if they built ironworks in Virginia? Yes, sending miners and blacksmiths to jointly develop iron ore with the emperor. Elizabeth slowly reads again the words on the flyers laid out on the table. The Virginia Trading Company seeks skilled craftsmen, blacksmiths, goldsmiths, miners, bricklayers, tanners, farmers, etc. Please contact. Blacksmiths are listed first. In fact, Raleigh recruited many blacksmiths and took them to the New World. That means iron ore supply must be good in that land. Virginia can provide the resource England needs most. Gift artisans and ironworks to the emperor's territory, and share the harvest from that land. He will surely welcome it too. He will receive iron for his war against Spain. The Queen thought this while anxiously waiting for Raleigh. She couldn't even guess why Raleigh had called for blacksmiths first. She couldn't even imagine that there was simply unlimited steel spontaneously appearing in Virginia. It wasn't her fault, of course. Equals. As someone who studied world history in Japan, I know a few facts. England is the country that created the most Independence Days in the world. And it was the first country to wage war just to sell drugs. Though England is our ally, looking at what they do to Spain, I don't have much to say. A country that gives nobility titles for successful piracy. Originally, when you think of England, you think of imperialism, and when you think of imperialism, you think of England. A remarkable country that massacred enough people in Ireland and India to build several nations. That's what I thought. So, England abolished slavery? That's what I'm told. Her Majesty the Queen has always, deeply, abhorred slavery. Ahem. See? You're clearing your throat because you have nothing to say either. You should have a conscience. I saw it in the Immortal Order catalog too. Queen Elizabeth herself sponsored slave traders and directly invested in the trade, so stop lying. Anyway, Raleigh, caught between my suspicious gaze and his loyalty to his lover the Queen, cleared his throat and avoided my eyes. Well, isn't it good that it's good? Well, that's true. Anyway, isn't it a beautiful thing? Raleigh is right. Good is good. Life doesn't always go according to principle. Even villains can do good deeds. Like when a cow catches a mouse while stepping backward, and actions with evil intentions can produce good results. Let's just say this is similar. Chapter 84. Iron and Intentions. 2. After talking with Raleigh, who had briefly visited England, I tried to somehow accept the current situation. It's a good thing, right? Even by 21st century Japanese ethical standards, there's nothing to criticize. No, I take that back. 21st century Japanese ethics certainly wouldn't condone piracy. Let's just say it's good and move on. There are many other issues to worry about. Walter, please tell me about the next matter. Her Majesty has sent 50 blacksmiths and 50 miners. She wants to build ironworks here. What? I wanted to tell her that there isn't even an iron mine here, because we've already brought so many iron products from our side. Well, it doesn't make sense. We've taken aluminum foil and needle syringes to London, but we don't even have an iron mine here? To Elizabeth, it would sound like saying, we have nuclear power plants, nuclear submarines, and nuclear bombs, but actually no uranium. Even I think that's nonsense. I completely understood Raleigh's position. Well, it doesn't matter anyway. There's an open-pit mine on Roanoke Island. How did you know that? No, never mind. There are indeed things beyond human wisdom. I knew it from the game catalog too. Well, I don't know what kind of company Fansuka Software is, but considering they send people to the past and shamelessly sell DLC in pieces, it is beyond human wisdom. Anyway, Walter, take the artisans to Roanoke Island for now. Placing Queen Elizabeth's ironworks on Roanoke Island would be perfect. It's far from both Croton Island and Chesapeake Bay, and being an island makes it easier for us to control the personnel. Her Majesty asked if sharing half of the produced iron would be acceptable. She instructed me to ask for Nemo's thoughts before proceeding. That's fine with me. We gain free resources. However, why ironworks specifically? Is iron so scarce that you need to get it from here too? Yes, I suppose so, Raleigh says with a sigh. It's England's chronic problem. We have no timber. We have to spend fortunes importing timber and iron ingots from Sweden and Denmark. No matter how I look at it, the war with Spain was a mistake. Raleigh's brief explanation mingles with what I already know. First, it was good. They could suck money from Spanish colonies through piracy. After destroying the Invincible Armada, nothing could stop them. That's usually where history class stops teaching. So England, after winning this war, gained Atlantic hegemony, laying the foundation to become a world power, while Spain declined to become a second-rate country. But according to the detailed content in Immortal Order, the truth was different. Fansuku Software's historical accuracy is good. In fact, England didn't really win, didn't gain Atlantic hegemony, and Spain didn't fall to become a second-rate country. It's just that modern British people agreed to forget the unpleasant parts of history, like the part where they attempted a counterattack on Spain right after defeating the Invincible Armada, got completely crushed and fled. Or the part where after Elizabeth I died and James I ascended, they made major concessions to Spain to finally reach a peace agreement. It's similar to a high school bully whitewashing their otaku loner middle school days. So, England is falling behind, you say? Yes, no point in denying it now. Raleigh says with a sigh. I'm slightly alarmed. Wait, this is more serious than what was in the game catalog. Unlike the game catalog, which was written under the firm premise that England would be a future hegemonic power, the story coming from a contemporary's mouth was much more stark. Spain is the strongest nation. It will continue to be so for decades. But for England to become the strongest nation, they'll have to wait about 200 more years. It feels like investing in a stock that's not even publicly listed yet, just believing it will rise. Can we really be properly protected from Spain? If we annoy them just a little more, won't the Spanish Navy catch us like mice? Don't worry. England is small but great. England has Sir Drake and likewise the right and left feet of the great Admiral John Hawkins. Oh, this gentleman is dead. Anyway, England has the great British spirit that continues from King Arthur. Did King Richard the Lionheart and the Black Prince Edward emerge for nothing, right? And you're a descendant of the Anglo-Saxons who killed those Britons. And these familiar statements make me more anxious. Oh, I hope the butterfly effect of history doesn't result in something like England's Virginia colony, 1588-15 NN, destroyed by Spanish invasion. With England collapsing after overinvesting here, that can't happen. Then I would be treated as an angel, formerly, and burned at the stake. Worse, I wouldn't even die from burning, so I'd burn forever. England must survive. Provide as much support as possible for the ironworks, Walter. Pardon? Of course. No, I mean spend 1.5 to 2 times more resources than you're thinking. Understand. Ah, I understand. After saying this, Raleigh withdrew to examine the iron ore of Roanoke Island. I wiped away cold sweat and leaned back in my chair. Yes, I hope nothing goes wrong. Anyway, what could craftsmen from England make with an ironworks? At best, they'd make steel with lacking technology or cheap cast iron. Yes, that should be. Wait, cast iron could be useful in many ways? Oh, it might help the settlement more than I thought? Equals. By now, our artisans must have arrived. Isn't that so, Lord Cecil? To the Queen's words, England's Lord Privy Seal and Treasurer William Cecil bows and says, Indeed, Your Majesty, it is clear that the Emperor of that New World land is preparing for war, and soon the Spaniards will face armies equipped with English iron throughout Nueva España. I'm glad you share my thoughts. The corners of the Queen's mouth rise sharply. That Felipe of Spain will have much to worry about. She can already vividly imagine the Emperor, armed with weapons made by English artisans, leading thousands and tens of thousands of soldiers to overwhelm Spanish settlements. That ironworks will be a sword and shield the Queen hands to her ally, and a sharp dagger to thrust at her enemy. She's already delighted. What kind of weapons will the Emperor make with the newly forged iron? Equals. My predictions were mostly correct. Over here, those who ordered hinges. Come out. Oh my, an iron pot. Cast iron is inexpensive and easier to make than steel, and as the name suggests, cast iron, it's suitable for making castings. Therefore, while it may not be suitable for weapons that require strength, most daily necessities are made from cast iron. For example, pots and pans, various tableware, or hinges and locks. In that sense, as the ironworks was established, the lives of our community settlers became gradually more comfortable. That's not all. Doi. Assemble this. Yes, it came out roughly as ordered. When making automatic water pumps, I was worried about parts like the boiler room that couldn't be cast in large molds. But now, not only boiler rooms but also large mechanical parts like crankshaft flywheels could easily be cast. Our forge in Chesapeake Bay could now outsource to Elizabeth's artisans whenever we needed casting work, or when we needed parts that didn't require precise processing or high strength. Thus, the quality and productivity of machines throughout our settlement also improved. But this isn't the main point either. Not at all the main point. Clunk. My newly acquired cast iron skillet. Thud. My newly acquired cast iron Dutch oven. And various camping equipment. I set up mine or *ent camping tent, lights, and chairs that I had purchased when Shine Muscat grapes were in season, and started a fire. Of course, I lit the fire with a camping fire stick. As I lit the fire, sizzling sounds emanated from the Dutch oven and skillet placed above it, while white smoke rose. When I brought my face closer, steam clung to my face, and delicious aromas wafted up. Smells good. Sitting in a 12,000 yen folding chair, putting my feet up on the grass, and looking up at the sky, I see stars seemingly pouring down from the spring night sky. Ah, so good. In the distance, insects are chirping, and nearby, music plays from my portable amplifier. Since it's the countryside of America, which doesn't exist yet, I put on some country music, nodding off drowsily. Then waking to my phone's alarm, I open the Dutch oven lid. Oh, a perfectly browned lobster bake is ready. I gently melt butter on top while flipping the beefsteak on the skillet. The most important change since the new ironworks was built is that I can now order lots of camping equipment that I couldn't afford in the 21st century. After hurriedly devouring the piping hot butter-baked lobster fresh from the oven, I opened a bottle of 1592 edition wine and poured it into a glass. Then I cut the steak without hesitation and put it in my mouth. I accompany it with wine. Ah, long live Queen Elizabeth. That's right. England was never a pirate nation. A country that bestowed such grace couldn't have done such bad things. Surely Spanish sailors were passing by English ships, throwing treasure chests overboard and diving into the sea by themselves. Those evil Spaniards. Framing the innocent English. Anyway, enough nonsense. Hearing rustling sounds, I saw Virginia approaching with large strides, having smelled the food. As Eleanor hurriedly tried to catch Virginia, I stopped her and shared lobster with both of them. There's plenty of lobster anyway. Just a bit of dabbling in the nearby sea yields lobsters. I have about 3 more in the tub right now. Is this life? Crunch. Ah, hot, hot, hot. Wild lobster is delicious. Beef is even more delicious. This is why I got transported here. Chapter 85. Major Blow 1. Let's review the current situation. England has abolished slavery. Drake is liberating slaves. So, are England and Drake on the good side? England on the good side? It feels similar to a righteous Nazi or a benevolent Japanese empire, but I suppose that's what the butterfly effect of history is about. No, that's not right. After enjoying luxurious camping with cast iron from England, my thinking has become a bit compromised. Perhaps England has been excessively disparaged, and Spain was actually the bad one. Anyway, I conducted a brief interview to learn about the situation of the slaves newly liberated by Drake. But then, is it okay to talk now? My name is Nemo.
Ah, fortunately.
Someone among the Indios who can speak Spanish. Are you perhaps the chief of this region? Can't you speak any language other than Spanish? Well, I was born in a Spanish colony. Thank you so much for liberating me. But there's a small problem. What is it? You see, I didn't have a bad relationship with my previous master. I was baptized in the Catholic Church, and I had saved up enough property to be freed soon. The master who was going to free me and give me land. He died? Then, the small plot of land and property that my master was going to give me, it's gone. Of course, I'm really happy to be liberated, but is this really liberation? Isn't this essentially kidnapping? There were sporadic cases like this, although they were the minority. Here, we call the length of this pipe 1 meter, and a square with sides of 10 meters has an area of 1 ar, and 100 ares is 1 hectare. We'll distribute about 2 hectares of cultivated land per household. Later, we'll increase it to 50 hectares. Till then, 50 hectares means, my goodness! Fortunately, the land and property I intended to give were naturally more than what the master had promised, so most issues were resolved without complaints. But, come to think of it, I heard that before the American Civil War, slaves in the South sometimes ate better than workers in the North. And Spain's slavery system was more flexible than expected, with cases of slaves who escaped from English colonies in the 17th century being freed after converting to Catholicism in Spanish colonies. The slavery issue is so complex. Well, still, being suddenly captured, dragged across the Atlantic, and forced into labor is the same regardless, so terms like generous, somewhat humane, or flexible only go so far. Still, it remains ambiguous. Thank you. I lived near Concaw when I was suddenly captured by the Safi people, and most people were grateful to me and happy that we could communicate. I comforted myself with this fact as I walked around. Excuse me, do you have a moment? I turned around to see who it was. It was Vicente. I have all the time in the world. What is it? Is there another problem with the cultivator? No, that's not it. I just wanted to ask you something. Go ahead. What is it? Why is he hesitating so much? Vicente lowered his head briefly, appearing to ponder deeply, and only after some time passed did he ask me. It's about how you used the surplus aluminum to free the slaves. Just when I was already troubled, he's trying to pour more oil on the fire. Without showing that sentiment, I nodded to his words with a benevolent and calm smile, back in wise angel mode. Yes, Vicente, please speak. Was what Nemo did the Lord's will? Of course, all people are equal before the Lord, right? If I just say obvious things according to my standards and wrap it up, so the Lord disapproves of slavery? Pardon. But doesn't the Bible repeatedly tell servants to serve their masters well? Although I'm no priest, several passages come to mind. That's because the Bible was written in ancient times. Of course, I couldn't answer like that, so I found an appropriate skill to use. Didn't I tell you? Don't fixate on the literal words of the Bible. Ah, good. That was an appropriate evasive maneuver. I hardened my expression, closed my mouth, and made a face that said, I've said all there is to say. Vicente tilted his head but stepped back. I quickly changed the subject with a cough. By the way, it's about time Sir Drake returned. Look, it's Sir Drake. He really does arrive right on cue. It was good timing. I could already see Drake running towards us, covered in blood.
Vicente.
Hey, I have good news. What is it? What good news? Is it about how coolly he cut off some Spaniard's head? Thankfully, it really was good news. Your family. You found them. Kidnapped them from Santa Elena. Is that really good news? Anyway, upon hearing Drake's words, an excited Vicente rushed to Drake's ship, and I ran after him. Soon, we witnessed a touching family reunion after 8 years. The English have kidnapped us. We'll be sold as slaves.
DDR.
It's me. Get a hold of yourself. I am seeing the ghost of my husband who died in a foreign land. I think I've gone mad. But if I can just die while being mad like this. I glared slightly at Drake. Drake shrugged as if asking what the problem was. I clearly told them the story. Your husband is looking for you, and he's alive and well in the Virginia colony. Of course, they didn't believe me at all. So I cut off the head of one of the Santa Elena militia and waved it in front of them to scare them a bit. What a crazy bastard. Whatever the case, Vicente's wife soon regained her senses and began a somewhat touching reunion with Vicente, while Drake approached me and started talking. Anyway, as you requested, I rescued the families of the crew from Santa Elena. I'm grateful, Sir Drake. So, about the aluminum. You'll need to prepare exactly about 2.78 kilograms. Really, he's so precise when it comes to aluminum. Look at how perfectly he's adapted to kilograms. When I glanced at him sideways, he cleared his throat, perhaps feeling embarrassed. Ahem. Setting aside the aluminum talk, our losses were greater than expected when attacking Santa Elena. The rumors that they were expanding their colony and reinforcing its defenses were true. I suppose you have a request. Yes, I do, Your Majesty, Drake said with a meaningful smile. Did you know that the Spanish are importing more slaves? What? Why? Shouldn't imports decrease with such frequent raids? It's for reinforcing the northern part of the Nueva España colony. Ultimately, it's because they fear the growth of Virginia. So what should we do? There's not much we can do. The sea is vast, Spanish ships are numerous, and they will bring in many slaves. Unless we block the sea and destroy all Spanish ships, what can we do? That's true. I bit my lips slightly, and Drake stared at me before adding one more thing. However, I know a way to strike a major blow against the Spanish. Chapter 86. Major Blow, 2. He handed me a document. I read the lines on it. It was a plan for a fleet's voyage. Not an ordinary plan. This was... I snatched it through a spy. It's a massive scale. It seems they're planning to move hundreds to thousands of slaves soon. Not just slaves, but various ivories and treasures from Africa too. A treasure fleet is setting sail for the New World. The treasure isn't important. Of course, that's understandable. Your Majesty is wealthy enough. Well, just know that slave trading will happen on a large scale. And here,
Top.
below were detailed dates and plans. Departing from Portugal on a certain month and day, when they would reach African colonies, how many slaves they would buy, when they would depart for the Caribbean and arrive. Very detailed. We will ambush them when they approach Trinidad Island. I see. But would it be possible for the people here to participate in the battle? What did you say? When I showed my surprise, Drake continued with an unusually cautious tone. It's a huge trading fleet. If we raid them, the slave trade in this region will be weakened for a while. But our fleet alone seems insufficient. We've lost quite a few soldiers and ships in various battles, and as you can see from the plan, the enemy has 15 ships. It's a challenging opponent even for our fleet of 20 ships. I ask just this once. Even if it means reducing the amount of aluminum I receive. Aluminum, that's of no consequence. It's a precious metal to them, but it flows abundantly for me. What concerns me isn't something like aluminum. At first glance, participating doesn't seem like a bad idea. If we put England's navy in our debt and leave a record of fighting together as allies, the importance of our community to England would be elevated, and it wouldn't be bad to jointly respond to Spanish threats in the future. The benefits of improved relations with England don't end there. Our community of just tens of thousands can't be completely self-sufficient from Europe. We need a strong rope like England connecting us to the European world to better import external goods. But going into battle? Taking the locals with us? Just a moment. What if there are casualties? Thinking this, I sought advice from Raleigh and others. Piracy? How exciting! Getting advice from Raleigh is clearly a failure. After all, he's the man who led several privateers and burned Spanish colonies. I thought that after being called a saint in London, his behavior should have improved a bit. Don't you agree, Eleanor? What? About what? No, even so, human lives could be in danger. People are half dead when they go to sea anyway. Wouldn't the Lord forgive us for killing a few seamen? What? But you're a saint. How can you say so innocently? We won't go to hell for killing a few Spaniards. Don't you know the 10 Commandments? Feeling an inexplicable chill, I asked others. More specifically, Mr. Hewitt. Of course I agree. Mr. White. If only I were a bit younger, I could have joined you. Mr. Bacon. The glory of England is thus enhanced. Why do you ask? I only asked the English. These pirate scoundrels. Anyway, the natives, who didn't particularly care whether England fought Spain or aliens, showed a whatever-works reaction and agreed with the English. Vicente was even more ridiculous. Excellent. Let's drive away the forces threatening this holy community. Why are you looking at me like that? Don't you feel any hesitation? I'm not Spanish anymore, am I? And so it was decided. We would also participate. I took Raleigh and Vicente to a nearby hut for a meeting. Since both had experience as seamen and commanders, they could adequately assist me, who knew little about ships and naval battles. The first conclusion from the meeting: I'm going too. What? But your life could be in danger. Vicente, do you think I would be in a life-threatening situation? I'm going too. Being immortal was particularly good at times like this. I could dive in without considering the risks. I had to go. How would Virginia community soldiers think of me if the Angel wasn't involved in a holy war freeing slaves? Though I gave up going to Europe during the Black Death because it was too dangerous, this is different. Moreover, my presence would make it easier to claim our share from England later. For the morale of the soldiers, for my position, for the community, I had to go. Above all, these English pirates. Who knows what they might do without me? And the next conclusion: Drake, we will sail separately. What? We'll go separately from Drake's fleet. There are many problems with going together with Drake's fleet. First, clipper ships become incredibly fast when catching favorable winds and currents, but conversely, become turtles when facing headwinds. Plus, they're transport ships, not warships, so their combat power is low. If we chose the wrong route and position, instead of showcasing the might of 19th century vessels, we'd likely become floating wooden planks. For now, Sir Drake, please wait near Trinidad Island, going against the current. We will secretly track the route of those merchant ships from Africa, staying outside their firing range. What did you say? Then, right after combat begins, we'll attack the enemies from behind. Drake's face contorted at my words. To Drake, it would sound like nonsense. It might sound like cowardice since I'm saying we won't confront the enemies head-on. Of course, I devised the strategy because I didn't want to face the enemy directly with ships not designed for combat, so it's half true that we're avoiding direct confrontation. Originally designed for cargo transport, these ships are just oversized by this era's standards with only about 10 cannons equipped, making them weak vessels. Under normal circumstances, they would be difficult to use effectively in naval battles. However, at least it's not nonsense. Of course, for this plan to work, several assumptions are necessary. First, we need to be able to accurately determine our position at sea. From this point, Drake would consider it hopeless. Following them while maintaining a distance where the enemy won't notice, then suddenly accelerating to catch up? That's also nonsense. If I can see the enemy can see me, so how could I tail them? And maintaining a distance where we can't be seen, then suddenly accelerating at the end to attack from behind? Are there ships that fast? Drake looked perplexed, alternating his gaze between me, Raleigh, and Vicente, then said, This is an impossible strategy, Baron of Roanoke? Haven't you explained properly to His Majesty? And Raleigh replied, It's an entirely possible strategy. What? It's difficult to explain the exact circumstances, but just know that it's possible. Drake doesn't have a watch. Similarly, Drake doesn't have a telescope. Lastly, Drake doesn't have a 19th century clipper ship. From his perspective, it's as if he heard during the strategy meeting, we'll teleport, identify the enemy with clairvoyance, then catch the enemy from behind using telekinesis. Just know it's possible and don't ask questions. However, seeing Raleigh's firm expression, he subtly nodded. Just make sure it doesn't disrupt the overall plan. As the meeting was wrapping up, Vicente said, clasping his hands, Lord, grant us the ability to become righteous pirates. Amen. Amen. That sounded familiar, but I just bowed my head deeply. Amen. That's how our plan was formulated. Soon, 2 clippers headed towards Ndakaru, a port city in West Africa, to load the liberated slaves and track the Spanish. Chapter 87. Land of Freedom 1. Clang. Clang clang. Huff, huff. Are you all right?
I'm
Still fine for now. How about you, Walter? I wasn't particularly short even in Japan, but since coming here, I've noticed something.
I'm
Finding it a bit difficult. I've become something of a giant. This is the 16th century. It's an era where the nutritional status and growth environment of people worldwide are much worse compared to 21st century developed countries. Whether Walter Raleigh or Vicente Gonzalez, despite being sturdy white adult men of this era, they were about 10 centimeters shorter than me. The differences in physique and strength were naturally significant as well. Would you like to take a break?
No.
We don't have much time before departure, so let's leave it to Vicente. Hey, Vicente, come and spar with Nemo in our place. Me? Isn't there someone else? Thomas Hewitt is a lawyer, and John White is a painter. Who else is there besides us? That's why it wasn't surprising that the 2 men who were supposed to teach me swordsmanship and other miscellaneous martial arts before the battle quickly collapsed. Originally, they were going to teach me physical training methods and other things as well. But naturally, no matter how systematic they might be, 16th century physical training methods wouldn't surpass the various exercise methods of the 21st century. After skipping various processes like that and moving straight to swordsmanship, this was the result. Huff! Ha! All 3 collapsed. People often say that 21st century people who just sit at desks are much weaker than people from the past. That doesn't apply to me. You bastards. Am I not a 21st century person? Office workers always think they're the only ones who exist in the world. So, when holding a sword, balance of the body is most crucial, and defending against an enemy's attack is, Come to think of it, do I need to defend? Vicente, I still feel pain. Aha! What do you mean, aha? Don't act like you just realized something. I still wake up sometimes because of the memory of being stabbed. Come to think of it, my first stabbing in life was because of you. Anyway, huff. Ha. You said you'd teach me swordsmanship, but it's unfamiliar to me and just tiring. Is that so? But if hand-to-hand combat were to break out, then I'll use my own methods, Walter. The 2 men whispered to each other about me and soon nodded, saying to me, Understood. Well, Nemo, you're superior in both physique and strength, so it should be fine. Normally, for a person going into their first battle, we just hope they don't get hurt. But surely you won't get hurt, will you? Wow, they don't worry at all. I'm a person too. A person? Oh right. I'm not a person to them. Looking back, I should probably first consider whether someone who survives a sword to the heart is a person, but well, that's not important. A few days later, I boarded the Voyager after preparing appropriate means of self-defense. And so, raising the banner of slave liberation, we began our magnificent voyage. End of voyage. Arrival at Ndakaru, West Africa, modern-day Dakar, the capital of Senegal. It's a port not far from Ribera Grande, where the Spanish are likely stationed. It's also a gateway for slaves and various luxuries like gold, ivory, and more. Walter, do you hear any news about the Spanish? Since Spanish and Portuguese frequently visit the area, when looking for information, it's not immediately clear if it's about the fleet we're seeking. Results should come soon. And according to the data Drake brought, there are still about 3 to 4 weeks before they depart. Right? Then, yes, we have enough time to release the liberated slaves. Let's move slowly along the coast then. So we left Ndakaru and moved southwest. Soon we could reach the coast near the homeland of most Africans we had brought. We set the liberated ones ashore, and they slowly looked around, breathing in the air of their now unfamiliar homeland. In truth, it might be ambiguous to call it a homeland. It's not like if a Martian kidnapped a Japanese, a Swede, a Lebanese, and a Vietnamese, and then roughly released them in New York, they would have been returned to their homeland. It's also amusing that people who lived in different tribes, speaking different languages, are grouped together and roughly dropped here solely because they were all captured as slaves by Spain. But this was our best option. We couldn't find and return each of them to their individual homelands. Most people's hometowns had disappeared entirely. Still, most of them now knew how to speak Spanish and English, albeit clumsily, and had built bonds through shared experiences. I could only hope they could live together in this land. Look, new settlers. Baron Raleigh is here too. Move the new supplies first. In this new settlement, Liberia, a Latin word meaning land of freedom. I couldn't find a more appropriate name. In original history, it was also the name of the country established when American abolitionists returned freed slaves to Africa. Hundreds of freed slaves, whom we had previously dropped off and who had arrived in Liberia earlier, welcomed the latecomers in Spanish. In response, they hesitantly but steadily walked into the village surrounded by a palisade. All right, there was something I hadn't done for them yet. Wait, please wait. When I shouted, everyone who was moving forward turned around, startled. At my gesture, sailors laid muskets, ammunition, and various necessities at their feet. In this area, there are tribes armed not only with bows and arrows but also with firearms received from Europeans. Use these to protect yourselves and the lives of others. More settlers will come in the future. Walter Raleigh and Vicente Gonzalez here will steadily bring people who have gone through the same situation as you. So please welcome them. And one thing, do not enslave or sell other people. Please don't do to others what Europeans and other kings and chiefs have done to you. That's all I ask. Because you are free now. Naturally, there couldn't be anyone who didn't understand my words. They stared blankly at my face, then one by one picked up firearms and various necessities. Chapter 88. Land of Freedom, 2. However, for some reason, they couldn't readily leave the shore. As I was about to ask the reason, curious, the oldest middle-aged man among them asked in Spanish. Why? What do you mean? Why do you go to such lengths? Since being captured as a slave, I've seen many Spanish. Some were kind, others vicious. Someone would pour cold water on my back when they couldn't bear to see me working under the whip in hot weather, while another would fire bullets at me, urging me to mine silver faster. But in the eyes of all of them I was the same, a slave. Even a kind master might try to free me, but that too wasn't without a price. I see myself reflected in the middle-aged man's eyes. I see an ordinary grape farmer. But what you're doing now has no price at all. Yet he seemed to see something else in me. You cross the sea for something without any return, and you hand food and weapons to people who have nothing to do with you. What you ask in return is next to nothing. I heard you're soon going to risk your life to fight with others. That's right. Why on earth? Is it because it's written in your scripture? But my Spanish master also taught me to obey according to the words of the scripture. Isn't that strange? I can't understand. Don't try too hard to understand. After pondering my answer, I look at Vicente and Raleigh standing on either side of me. I see the many freed slaves lined up behind the middle-aged man, and the Spanish, English, and Algonquin people lined up behind me. I chose my words carefully, because I realized that whatever I said would be eternally remembered in their minds. All those disasters that befell you, what I was saying wasn't just for the middle-aged man before me, but for all Europeans, Africans, and Americans gathered here. Can you understand those disasters and malice? Can you understand why the world is so cruel and terrible? I dare not understand. Can you? At my words, the middle-aged man seemed to ponder for a moment, then shook his head. I don't know either. How things came to be this way. Then there's no need to understand this either. Because it's not in the realm of understanding. I told him, I didn't do it because our scripture says so, but because it was the right thing to do. My soul commanded it, and so I followed. There's no need for something to follow the right deed. They often say punishment follows those who do evil, and reward follows those who do right. But even without a reward, a right deed has value in itself. So I did it. Is your curiosity satisfied now? At my words, the middle-aged man blinked his eyes for a moment, then opened his mouth. I still don't understand, but I know one thing. You are truly a peculiar being. With that, the conversation ended. As the middle-aged man turned around, the others also slowly moved toward the new settlement. As I too turned to go back to the ship, everyone was looking at me. Raleigh murmured a light prayer toward me. So, who exactly is he? There was nothing in common among the residents of Liberia. Their tribes, languages, homelands, bloodlines, they shared nothing. Only one memory bound them together. Who on earth is he, to have done such a thing? Didn't you just talk with him? What did he say? The memory of liberation. Memories of a land called Virginia. Memories of the peculiar man who ruled there, who could speak all languages. Who was he? For what reason, and with what purpose did he set them free? Someone said they were chosen as an army to conquer this land. Couldn't they see from the periodic provision of weapons and food that Liberia was a fortress but also an outpost? Someone else said they were being deceived. Common sense dictated that no one would provide resources without any return, suggesting they were enchanted by a strange spirit. Whatever the truth, they remained anchored here without hearing any reason or purpose. Though they had established a settlement and continued to accept people, they lingered awkwardly, not knowing what to do. They wondered if they could just remain idle like this, and what his true intention might be. When word spread that the answer might come today, all the settlement's residents gathered and asked the middle-aged man. An angel! The middle-aged man uttered only that word, then quietly closed his eyes. Oh, amen! Converted Christians made the sign of the cross. The rest of the people tilted their heads, not knowing what it meant. But those others would soon know the meaning. No, all people of Africa would. Someday all people of the world would. They would know his will. Having completed our business, we returned to Ndakaru and hunkered down. We planned to stay here for a while to gather information, barring any other matters. What information to gather? First, we'll find out if the Spanish are buying merchandise, as Drake reported. Raleigh spoke in a hushed voice. We should observe the flow of conversations among merchants in this area. Will merchants provide information freely? Of course not. Do you need anything? And that's how we ended up stocking up on coffee beans. Wow, buying directly is much cheaper than through England. After enjoying the aroma of caffeine to my heart's content for several days, Raleigh comes running again. Found it! There was talk of a big contract, and upon investigating, there's a contract to purchase about 2,000 slaves at once. Since such a large contract is unprecedented, everyone's whispering about it. It's definitely about the fleet we've been looking for. When is the departure date set? 3 weeks later, just as we previously found out. Still, we should silently observe the flow of people and goods. We've already confirmed the general information, haven't we? Is there a need to take risks by observing further? There is. I've heard that large warships are gathering in Ribeira Grande, and shouldn't we assess their military strength as much as possible? Raleigh spoke firmly and nodded. I'll go further. I'll have Spanish sailors inquire while minimizing contact with the Spanish in Ribeira Grande. Understood. Time passed again. Not long after, Raleigh rushed into the cabin for the second time. I've confirmed the size of the enemy fleet. Don't we already know that? 15 ships. It's 23 ships. What? It seems they noticed the information leak to Drake from the beginning. Moreover, Raleigh hung his head and said, they've already departed. We must track them immediately. Chapter 89. Premature Encounter 1. Just as Raleigh had tracked them, the Spanish were also on high alert after suffering successive pirate attacks. And then, a piece of news reached their ears. There are English people coming and going in Dakaru. It might have been nothing significant. Originally, French or English people frequently visited this place. Go good heavens! Isn't Dakaru right under our noses? Stay calm. There's no mention of seeing that fellow Drake, just some English people. Probably just merchants. Why would just merchants come here? Didn't they ban the slave trade? Besides, English and just merchants? There's no such thing. They're just pirates with merchant side jobs. That's true too. But the Spanish staying in Ribera Grande were divided in opinion after hearing the news. We need to leave Ribera Grande quickly. Dakaru is just a stone's throw away. How many ships do we have in our fleet? Are we going to flee just because a few English have appeared? You never know. They might just be scouts, and the real ones might be lurking behind them. It was a chilling possibility. Even those who were complaining about the loss if they left now without fully loading cargo on their ships. Even those who were concerned about losing the trust of local merchants in Ribera Grande if they didn't respect the contracts they were obliged to fulfill. Faced with the threat of English pirates, everyone fell silent. Well then, let's hurry with the departure. Our fleet will need some time to prepare. Drake's fleet is targeting the American colonies. It's imperative that we move these ships to the New World. Even so, 3 weeks is too drastic, so let's move the plan forward by about 2 weeks. 2 weeks should be enough. It should be sufficient to shake off any enemies following from behind. Thinking this, the Spanish suppressed an ominous feeling that was somehow creeping up. They departed 2 weeks earlier than planned? Yes, it was my oversight.
I'm sorry. No, Walter.
Let's quickly track them for now.
Vicente?
How long do you think it will take to catch up with them? Since their route is obvious anyway, if we navigate well. Well, shall we depart first? I think we'll catch them soon. Anyway, they had watches, telescopes, and 21st century maps. And the routes taken by those who lacked these 3 things were predictable. Drake had been patiently waiting for news on the South American coast for days, repeating the routine of eating and sleeping. To reach Trinidad Island, they would surely pass near this coast, and then they would inevitably be spotted by those guarding in this vicinity. Then, he would strike the faces of the complacent Spanish, bombard them with cannon fire, and when they reached their limit, engage in hand-to-hand combat with superior numbers to completely crush them. Battle concluded. A vast amount of treasure and countless liberated African freemen would be obtained. Thinking this, Drake endured weeks of tedious living. His obsession with treasure made his eyes gleam, and his anticipation of carnage sharpened his senses. But his subordinates were different. Hey, what's the menu today? Why worry about a menu? Just eat anything and stand guard. Guard? The enemy won't arrive for another 3 weeks. What guard? Naturally, the sailors became lazy after spending a long time on land. They would go to nearby native villages to barter, gamble, and have fun. In such a situation with discipline completely relaxed. There. Spanish warships are in sight. What? There are still 2 weeks left. The prey had arrived. Hearing that the Spanish had arrived, Drake hastily drew his sword and boarded. The half-drunk sailors also hurriedly climbed aboard, pulling ropes and preparing to set sail. And so, as they headed to the shore, loaded the cannons, and observed the enemy's movements. Observed their movements. What the? Why are there so many? Boom, 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 boom. There were more enemies than expected. Cold sweat ran down Drake's spine. Clearly, the enemy escort fleet, which was about 15 ships in the obtained documents, had increased to 23 ships. That meant there were 23 ships surrounding the large flat-bottomed vessels. Even a large ship like a galleon had increased by 1. Oh, Lord F******. Maintain formation. We have the advantage since we're striking first. And then, boom, 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 boom. Cannonballs began to fly parallel to the water's surface again. Having approached while preparing to load first, the English side could deliver several powerful attacks. Meanwhile, the Spanish could only scramble around, unable to form a proper formation. As several small enemy ships already became inoperable with their masts broken, the English cheered. However, Drake himself bit his lip and thought, "It's not enough. In battle, the first factor is numbers, the second is numbers, and the third is numbers." And in all three, the Spanish seemed to be ahead. It was premature to rejoice just because a few small ships were thrown into confusion. Their advantage was only in morale gained from taking a long rest and in tactical superiority as surprise attackers. Therefore, if they didn't decisively break the momentum in the first attack, the battle would gradually become more disadvantageous. Fire! Boom, boom, boom. Allied cannon fire continued, and soon the sight of panicking Spanish on the deck came into view. But that was short-lived. Thud, thud, thud. Water sprayed up right in front of where Drake was watching. The enemy cannons had started loading. This meant that from now on, the Allies would only become more disadvantaged. Where are Virginia's ships? As expected, not in sight. Damn it. Somehow I thought it was a strange strategy, and it seems it didn't work out after all. It was a strategy that was too much even for a fleet commanded by the mystery of the sea. The enemy is approaching. Continue firing and wait. Hold position. The enemy ships began to close the distance, entering within range of Allied fire. Having confirmed their numerical advantage, they were trying to utilize it. They were planning to gradually surround and cook the Allies. Their intention to gradually bombard, close the distance, and then through hand-to-hand combat, conquer the Allied ships one by one was evident. What surprised Drake wasn't the enemy commander's judgment. A fleet isn't a single body, but a confederation of small, isolated islands floating on the sea. As such, the formation in naval battles can only be firmly established if it's meticulously coordinated and prepared. That's why the surprise attacker has an advantage in naval battles. However, now the enemies, without any sign of urgency, were making a long clockwise turn to disrupt the Allied formation. And when all the enemy ships simultaneously turned their port sides toward them, fire! Fuego! Dozens, hundreds of cannonballs began to fly in. Boom, 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 boom. The hull rocked back and forth and several sailors fell. They had clearly been hit by cannonballs somewhere. But it wasn't important. Hardly any ships sink from being hit by cannons anyway. As long as the mast doesn't break, it's fine. Chapter 90. Premature Encounter. 2. Is everyone okay? We're fine. Then don't just and stand there. Fire back. Thud, 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 thud. Cannonballs flew in all directions, skimming the water's surface like a school of flying fish, their black bodies flashing. The deck became chaotic with the mixed noise of soldiers unlucky enough to die from being hit by cannonballs, soldiers hurriedly patching hull breaches with planks, and soldiers shouting commands here and there. Ah! Ah! Looking back, several Allied ships had broken masts. The enemy ships? Just one or two. ************************************************************ Half defeated already. Drake laughed because he felt terrible. He took out the wine bottle from his waist, poured it over his head, drew his sword, and shouted, "Well, we're screwed. Prepare to flee." Even as he said this, Drake's eyes frantically traced the ships around. Judging by the arrangement of nearby islands, the current wind direction, and the movement of ships, we can't just flee smoothly. A fierce hand-to-hand battle would follow. Even though not much time had passed, even though only about 10 people had died in battle so far, Drake could already envision the scene. He wasn't the only one who sensed this. Experienced sailors were already loading guns and drawing swords. They sang boisterous songs among themselves to boost morale. And suddenly, silence fell all around. This was because both enemy and Allied cannonballs had dropped. The slowly approaching enemy ships were still maintaining their formation thoroughly, preparing for the coming melee. They prepare grappling hooks. They draw swords. They sing loudly to calm their fearful hearts. And then, boom, 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 boom. The silence is broken. The sudden cannon sound wasn't from the Allies. Then, was it from the enemies? No, it wasn't that either. That means, boom, 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 boom. Suddenly, the enemy formation starts to become disordered, as if someone had appeared from behind. Only then did Drake's view catch two huge transport ships. The clippers that had dangerously mounted several cannons on the deck just for this day. These ships swiftly turned and again showered the enemy with cannonballs, but the enemy ships, having already spent most of their cannonballs facing the enemy in front, could only struggle without being able to respond. The English sailors, who had been blankly watching this scene, like possessed, began to sing in rhythm and moved to their positions. Then they turned their ships toward the enemy vessels. The opportunity was when the enemies were scattered here and there. Drake, this time with a broad smile, shouted again, "Anyone preparing to flee dies by my hand." And no one prepared to flee. They are born pirates. They were born with an innate sense of who, where, when, and how to rob. And now the answer was clear. They had to rob the enemies right in front of them. Equals. I've only ever lived in cities or rural areas, but after slipping in and out of Croton and Chesapeake by boat, I got a feel for navigation. And after riding clippers for months, I realized something. This ship is insanely fast and terribly unstable, like a hijet with a jet engine attached. It's a ship that has completely sacrificed stability and comfort solely for speed. So life on board was terrible. The problem is also that this ship is a sailing ship, so even that speed becomes totally useless if you don't follow a certain route. And if you face a headwind, there's no answer at all. Given such a ship, its performance in battle was also clearly visible. A ship that can't mount many cannons, is large in size, has a low height, and simultaneously heavily depends on wind speed and direction for movement. This is a target. Now we should enter. Let's wait a bit longer. Nemo? Our allies are being pushed back. Not yet. So I waited for quite a while, until my precious sailors and clippers wouldn't turn into lumps of meat and pieces of board, respectively. Nemo, no more cannon sounds are heard. Now's the time. Now's the time, comrades. Let's go kick those slave traders' behinds right away. And now was that time. When Raleigh and I shouted simultaneously, all the sailors moved at once. A favorable wind was blowing. Like racehorses that have heard the starting gunshot, the two ships began to sprint madly. And before the enemies could even react, turn. While turning, fire. Boom, 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 boom. The Spanish, suddenly hit by cannonballs without knowing why, fall into panic and flail around. This isn't simply because they saw our two ships. If enemy ships have surprised them once, couldn't it happen twice? They start to panic, unable to gauge how many more reinforcements England might have. Some throw grappling hooks at our ship, but they don't reach the range, so they just fall into the sea in vain. Plus, we still have plenty of cannonballs. Fire! Boom, boom. Few cannons, but large cargo capacity. In other words, we can only fire a little at a time, but we can store and use as much ammunition and cannonballs as we want. As we continued our bombardment, the enemies now turned their ships to port and starboard in complete confusion and tension. And through that chaotic gap, English ships began to charge. Boom, 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 boom. After such indiscriminate firing, the Spanish ships became completely like rags and staggered. The English ships slip in between and induce a melee. Satisfied with achieving our goal, we applauded in celebration. The Voyager led by Vicente had already poured out lots of cannonballs and was retreating, and it was time for us to do the same. All right, Walter? Everyone prepare to retreat. Maintain firing range and shoot at the enemies. Enemy ships, now thoroughly agitated, belatedly chase after us. But it's already too late. We unfurled our sails and again accelerated toward the rear. Or tried to. The wind stopped. Our clipper, not disappointing expectations, stopped abruptly. Should we row instead? While thinking this, enemy ships slowly approach. They target only this Enterprise, abandoning the already distant voyager, carrying sailors who are thoroughly agitated and spouting all kinds of curses in Spanish. They are spinning ropes with grappling hooks for hand-to-hand combat, looking down at our ship. Yes, looking down. This ship has a low height, so it's disadvantageous for hand-to-hand combat. Walter, I'm here. Tell everyone else to go below deck. Everyone, take shelter below deck, and secure the entrance tightly. And please give me that. Understood. So I picked up that, and Raleigh lifted a shield made of Lexan. With just a few people left on the deck, Spanish men jumped down. Raleigh, position yourself well to avoid being surrounded, and cover me. Understood. The rest of you, be careful with your lives. Understood, Nemo. Soon, Spanish men who jumped in from all directions look around and they hesitate upon seeing that. What is that terrible thing? Why, what else would it be? A great communication tool. I swung the chainsaw and charged at the enemies. Everyone fire. Quickly. Behind me, musketeers with Lexan shields covered me. Chapter 91. The Mystery of the Sea-1. There. A large flat-bottomed ship. A transport vessel full of treasure. Idiot. Ignore it for now. Focus on capturing the enemy warships first rather than the transport ships that can't escape anyway. Drake moved busily. The Spanish now realized there were no more enemy reinforcements. But while they were confused about whether to respond to the front or the rear, the tide of battle had already turned. Throw the grappling hooks. Open fire. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Rat-a-tat-a-tat. Drake sensed victory. Allied ships approached the scattered enemies, engaging in hand-to-hand combat to conquer them, then moved on to capture other ships. As this process repeated several times, the initial numerical advantage was completely reversed, and St. George's cross flags of England waved everywhere. This time we'll take down that carrack. You wah! As Sir Drake charged toward the enemy ship with a maniacal smile, his troops followed, providing covering fire and overwhelming the enemy. During the time it took to capture 4 ships, not a single Spaniard had boarded Drake's flagship. It was a clear sign of how the battle was going. As Drake advanced, killing and capturing, he thought about what had led to victory in this battle. Without question, it was those 2 ridiculous ships from Virginia. Though he didn't know how that laughable strategy had succeeded, the miracle unfolding before his eyes made all other explanations meaningless. Indeed, the mystery of the sea is amazing. So the talking seagull and mermaid he saw then weren't hallucinations. Look, isn't that the sea god accurately determining his and the enemy's positions at sea? The fact that England's warships could now penetrate among the Spanish was all thanks to the unexpected cannon barrage that he had delivered from behind. Though it was a brief attack, it was enough to break the masts and hulls of many small ships and throw the larger ships into confusion. Come to think of it, his 2 ships they're over. Oh Lord damn it. Drake, while watching the enemy ships in the distance, encounters a desperate scene. About 3 warships surround one low, oddly shaped ship. Given the low hull of that so-called clipper, there's no way to prevent enemies from jumping onto the Allied ship. It was only a matter of time before that ship was captured. This can't happen. The person on board is the native emperor and de facto ruler of the Virginia colony, and a mysterious being of the sea. Drake raises the sword he's holding above his head, waving it in circles to focus the attention of his sailors. Right now, rush over there. Our allies are surrounded. At those words, the sailors immediately clear away the ropes and planks connected to the captured enemy ship and unfurl the sails again. As Drake's flagship rushes forward, the Spanish ships move aside, terrified of a collision. The path opens up. As soon as they approach the starboard side of one of the ships surrounding the Enterprise, Drake fearlessly jumps in and stabs his sword into a Spanish soldier's neck. Then he puts a bullet in the head of a surprised Spanish soldier, and while Drake buys time, English sailors place planks between the 2 ships and rush across. While allies belatedly follow, Drake, half intoxicated by the smell of blood, hurriedly runs to the port side and soon discovers the Enterprise in distress. Whir! The Enterprise in distress.
Montagmonster.
It's a monster.
Ça save me.
Lord, Essa save me. What is this? Equals. People often cite guns as the reason Spanish conquistadors were able to conquer the Aztecs and Incas. But is that so? Firearms of this era were remarkably primitive by modern standards. They required several minutes just to reload, suffered from poor accuracy at anything beyond close range, and were highly vulnerable to humid conditions that rendered gunpowder useless. A skilled archer could fire multiple arrows in the time it took to load and fire a single arquebus. While these early guns did offer superior penetration power compared to indigenous bows, this advantage was largely redundant against Mesoamerican warriors who typically wore only quilted cotton armor, ichkahuapili, or, at most, lightweight wooden shields. The devastating power of firearms against European plate armor simply wasn't necessary in these conflicts. Of course, in the initial encounters, firearms produced profound psychological impacts that shouldn't be underestimated. Weapons that could seemingly instantly fell an enemy from a distance, accompanied by thunderous noise, blinding flashes, and clouds of acrid smoke, appeared supernatural to peoples who had never witnessed such technology. These displays fundamentally undermined enemy morale and created an atmosphere of terror. The hail of bullets fired simultaneously by hundreds of men, regardless of their actual power, was enough to instantly break the enemy's spirit and make them kneel. And that was about it. After the Aztecs and Incas became accustomed to firearms, guns became nothing more than ordinary ranged weapons. Moreover, as gunpowder became difficult to supply, the conquistadors relied on crossbows and bows instead of guns. But conversely, in those early battles, gunpowder weapons were truly evil magic to the enemies. Whir! Don't come near. Don't come near, I said. Whir! Arg! Think of the laser weapons often seen in sci-fi movies, fired by aliens. In fact, while they look flashy with sparkling lights and impressive visual effects, they're often not much more powerful than modern firearms in their portrayal. But imagine encountering that in reality. Imagine a green-headed alien pointing a laser gun and a lightsaber at you. Who could possibly think rationally? This is hardly different from modern weapons. Ugh, help me. Splash. The Spanish soldiers who saw my chainsaw reacted exactly like that. In reality, the number of soldiers actually injured by my chainsaw was only about 3 or 4. Many times more were hit by friendly fire in their panic at the horrific appearance and roaring sound, or fell into the sea while fleeing. As about half of the dozens who rushed onto our ship fell into panic and confusion. Fire! Rat-a-tat-a-tat. Under Raleigh's command, soldiers with Lexan shields poured gunfire to deal with the remaining half. Just as the Spanish had overthrown natives many times more numerous with guns. We were overthrowing the Spanish with transparent shields and a screaming saw. Chapter 92. The Mystery of the Sea 2. After some time, is it over? Once the bodies of injured and unconscious Spanish soldiers were scattered all over the deck, I had time to look around. Looking at myself, my clothes were torn in several places, but I had no wounds. Just as it seemed we had dealt with all the enemies on the ship. What is that? Sir Drake? When did you arrive? No, I came to help, but... Drake boarded our ship with a half-dazed expression. Can I touch that? No, you cannot. TSK. No way. This would hurt a reckless Englishman if he touched it. As I moved slightly away from Sir Drake to turn off the engine, and Raleigh called Drake, causing him to turn his head. Yo, you goddamn devil. Ah, one Spanish man remained. Thwack. The Spaniard stabbed my stomach with his sword and showed a triumphant smile as if he had gained the upper hand. Whir! I immediately started the engine again and ground his nape. Then, like an office worker who woke up 4 minutes before work, I hurriedly pulled out the sword from my stomach and straightened my clothes. Damn it, of all times, in front of Drake. Well, seems there was one more enemy? Sir Drake. Yes. Did you? See that? See what? I was just conversing with Baron Raleigh until now. Nothing. Phew. He didn't notice. Equals. Let's avoid eye contact. One shouldn't maintain eye contact with the mystery of the sea for too long. You might go insane. Just now, I think I saw an illusion of him pulling a sword out of his body. Look, there's blood on his clothes, but not a single wound. Isn't that clean? Are you all right?
I'm fine, Walter.
What about the injured? Just a few soldiers with minor wounds like bullet grazes. Don't worry. Even Raleigh and others don't seem to have noticed him. Such an insensitive attitude. Only Francis Drake witnessed the scene just now. Indeed, those who claimed to have seen mermaids or strange sea creatures were all frauds. The Kraken, the Flying Dutchman, the Fountain of Youth, they must all truly exist. Now, since the battle seems to be wrapping up, I should head home. By home, you mean the bottom of the sea? Croton, I mean. I see. Oh, it's already 4:30. It's too late. So shall we dock at a nearby port? How did he know that when there's no sun due to clouds? Indeed, a mystery of the sea. This world is truly amazing beyond compare. Once this is over, I should go look for El Dorado. And so, Drake's belief in superstition deepens further. Take all the captured ships except 1 or 2. In exchange, we'll take care of the people who were captured as slaves. Ah, of course, Your Majesty. Ha ha ha. I wonder if we'll ever have such a magnificent and outrageous battle again. Now, we're completely safe. I realized this fact while feeling Drake's awe-filled gaze. England is the greatest ally of our Virginia community. Then what is the greatest potential threat to our community? The Spanish fleet? Close to the answer, but no. It's also England. The Spanish fleet is certainly dangerous, but they have much to protect, so it's difficult for them to unite and attack somewhere. The development of the England-Spain War, as described in the game catalog, shows this. After both countries attempted large-scale invasions of each other's mainland in the early stages of the war and amicably failed, large-scale frontal warfare did not occur again. When the English lurked around Spanish colonies and treasure fleets, the Spanish Navy mostly focused on fending off the swarms of English like flies. But the English Navy was different. Several fleets led by Walter Raleigh, Francis Drake, John Hawkins, and others took an offensive stance, attacking, besieging, and looting Spanish colonies, accumulating damage to Spain. Because England had nothing to lose from the start. The English burned and destroyed Cadiz, Cuba, Florida. They could do the same anywhere. But now they can't do that in Virginia. The English are reaping huge benefits thanks to me. They even fought alongside us as allies. Drake, England's most threatening naval admiral, also maintains a friendly attitude toward me and continues to maintain contracts with me. Now, it's probably safe to say that the threat to the colony has been almost eliminated. All that remains is to return to Virginia and enjoy a peaceful daily life. Thinking this, I happily set foot on the land of Chesapeake Bay. We won. Long live the Virginia community. Long live England. I disembarked amidst the cheers of many who sensed victory. Both Vicente and Raleigh welcomed the settlers' cheers with smiles all over their faces. Of course, most of the settlers, the natives, didn't particularly care who fought whom and how they won, but everyone was happy since we'd won the war. Just then, from a distance, Manteo, Eleanor Dare, Thomas Harriot, and John White approach. Congratulations! Such victorious news. Raiding the Spanish treasure fleet. I never thought you would achieve such a feat. Bacon cheered with excitement. You liberated 2,000 more slaves. I'm really glad. Eleanor Dare also sniffled with tears. If it's all right, may I take a look at the captured Spanish flat-bottom ship over there? We can use that ship to connect Chesapeake and Croton more closely in the future. Plus, all that silver. John White seemed to be pondering the benefits this victory would bring to the settlement. Since everyone was thrilled and excited, I too felt uplifted and spoke to Hewitt. Mr. Hewitt, how does it look to you? Hewitt replied, What's there to say? The community's treasury will be filled with Spanish treasure. We won't have financial shortages for a while. That's right. From now on, we'll have peace for a while. Now we just need to teach those Spanish bastards a lesson. What? Pardon. Suddenly, the atmosphere around my question turns cold. Somehow, the gazes of the English looking at me become strangely awkward. What? Why? As I stand perplexed, Raleigh slowly walks over and whispers to me. What? Do you mean? We haven't even started yet. Have we? What? Now that we've raided one Spanish treasure fleet, shouldn't we completely sweep away the enemies in this area? What? As I look around in confusion, those who heard Raleigh's words all nod together. Thomas Harriot too. Walter Raleigh too. John White too. All the other English as well. Now, let's break the pride of those Spanish bastards. Yuwa Eawa. They were shouting with the spirit of a shonen manga protagonist who exclaims, "Our adventure is just beginning. Are you all insane?" Chapter 93. Fortification 1. Spanish Florida. Numerous mission bases and military fortresses were scattered along the coast, with hundreds of Spanish settlements and their allied tribes dotted around. How can this be allowed? Let's plow it all up. What do you mean by plow it up? Florida is the gateway from the so-called Virginia, above to the Caribbean Sea. If we strengthen its defenses and station a fleet there, it would be much better for guarding against enemies. But that alone was insufficient. If they hastily withdrew from Florida out of fear of English attacks as before, it would more likely increase the tyranny of the English pirates centered around Virginia. Rather, they needed to broadly strengthen the defenses of the Florida colony to monitor the southward movement of English pirates and, furthermore, to prevent the growth of Virginia. Above all, does this native emperor really exist? Definitely. I saw it clearly with my own eyes. A physically imposing native massacring our soldiers like a madman, as the reality of the native emperor, thought to be mere propaganda, was revealed through the painful recent defeat. Florida now became the front line against not only England but also the mysterious emperor. In the end, abandoning Florida was no different from giving up control over the southeastern coast of North America and amounted to turning a blind eye to England's infiltration into the Caribbean coastal areas. And so, let us report to His Majesty the King about strengthening the Florida colony. How do we know if the report will be approved or not after submission? In this situation, His Majesty cannot but give his approval. A decree bearing Philip II seal was soon handed down to the Colonial Government Committee. Spanish Florida thus began to be thoroughly developed. Large-scale slave labor was invested to develop Florida. Immigrants were brought in large numbers from Spain and the Mexican colonies. Florida was made into a solid Spanish territory to check enemies. Such plans were made and implemented, but prepare the friendship gifts to send to the influential local tribes first. There are no volunteers right now. How should we? From the mainland? Same situation. The plan encountered obstacles after just a few steps. Send out immigrants in large numbers? Who would immigrate? Who would want to immigrate to a land full of barbarians, and one where English people might invade from anywhere at any time? Aren't black slaves already enough? Besides, we can bring in hundreds to thousands each year. Well, that's true. So what are you suggesting? We give out slaves for free to those who volunteer to immigrate to Florida. 10 slaves per immigrant. That way anyone can become a landowner in Florida. 10 slaves per person? That's financially.
2,000 immigrants.
No more, no less, just 2,000 people would be enough to defend Florida. If we give out 20,000 slaves for free, we can maintain naval hegemony in the Caribbean, can't we? Soon the answer was decided. Those who wanted to become landowners, commoners who wanted to become nobles of the New World flocked from mainland Spain and Mexico to head for Florida. Although the number of slaves given out was cut by 30% or even half, the immigration boom didn't subside. Anyone could become a plantation owner. Anyone could become a slave owner. Anyone could become rich. With such dreams, many headed for Florida. and so the colony was rapidly pioneered. Phew! Is this Florida? There are more wetlands than I expected. Don't worry, you won't be pioneering it, the slaves will. However, pioneering will occur after this area is fortified. The Spanish authorities needed quick results. Slaves were overworked to fortify Florida. Hurry up! I spent my entire fortune just on the ship fare to get here. Similarly, commoners who suddenly became nobles were also filled with dreams of building mansions and managing vast plantations. Under the whips wielded by the colonial authorities and new nobles, the slaves are pioneering the Florida colony. Then what happens to our missionary work? Even if we try to evangelize the dark-skinned Moorish slaves, their masters don't send them to church. By Bishop Las Casas also said in his later years, didn't he? Slavery is a sin. That's why the Holy Pope also liberated the natives from their enslaved state. Isn't it? Eventually, those Moors should also be liberated. Shoo!
Alonso García, quiet.
Slavery being a sin. About that statement, as much as I care for you, I'll restrain my words. Bishop Sebastian of the newly established Diocese of San Agustin admonished his young disciple whose head was heated from reading the books of radicals. Your job is not that. Didn't the Apostle Peter, the rock of the Holy Catholic Church, say that the chief virtue of a slave is to serve his master as he would serve the Lord? If slaves serve their masters well and don't fall into evil ways, they will naturally go to heaven. What are you so worried about? How can they go to heaven when they don't know the Lord? Then make them know the Lord, won't you? And so they can come to church on Sundays.
No.
If you try to force rest for Florida's slaves, you'll face backlash from the slave owners. Alonso felt deep regret in Sebastian's words. Yes, we cannot force slave rest upon them. It might be possible someday, but not now. His Majesty the King and his ministers are enthusiastic about pioneering Florida. To pursue ideals, one must first understand reality. Look, what can you do? Nothing. I can do nothing. That's not true. You can persuade those slave owners. If the master follows the Lord, the slaves will naturally come to know the Lord and reach heaven. Your job is not to wash the feet of tired slaves and feed them, but to wash and feed their souls. Realize the difference between those two things. The words of Bishop Las Casas and others, forget them for a while. Do what you can do. Thump. Alonso, where are you going? Just feeling stuffy. So I'll take a look around for a bit. Sebastian's immensely kind eyes and thoughtful voice evoked sadness in Alonso. As Alonso left the cathedral building and walked for a while, he soon came upon a vast spread of fields. Alonso suddenly noticed a scarecrow protruding from between the fields, and his legs gave out, causing him to sit down. The Spanish authorities extolled these immigrants as true crusaders fighting against England's Protestants, and they provided all sorts of conveniences to them. For example, they would even supply 2 or 3 new slaves if a slave was injured or died in an accident. To that extent, a slave's life in Florida was worth less than elsewhere. Rather than being precious labor as in other places, they became consumables. For instance, to the point of using the bodies of escaped slaves as scarecrows. The appearance of the corpse, eaten by rats and crows, was too difficult to look at straight on. But Alonso couldn't bring himself to turn away. Crusaders. The world is going mad. And there was nothing he could do. Most of the newly supplied slaves go to Florida, and the defenses there have significantly strengthened recently. Yes, you said such work had been going on from before. At my words, Raleigh firmly shook his head and told me, these days the scale is different. Even when passing through nearby waters, if we're not careful, we might be the ones getting hit instead. Raleigh circled areas on the printed map in front of me and said, here, this area especially. They've concentrated immigrants in one place and completely fortified the surroundings, making it not easy to attack. It's become ambiguous. Sir Drake keeps suggesting we target Cuba, but I suddenly thought we might not be able to keep this up for long. To summarize, now the place where slave trade is most actively conducted in Spanish America is Florida. But since Florida has strong defenses, Drake targets Cuba or other colonies. Until here, there might not be much of a problem. It's a pity that the number and frequency of slaves being liberated is decreasing, but at least it's not completely cut off. Chapter 94. Fortification. 2. The problem lies in Florida being the gateway between Virginia and the Caribbean Sea. If this continues, eventually, it might become difficult to even enter the Caribbean Sea. Correct. And in my view, Florida is just the beginning. The will of the Spanish is extraordinarily strong. As I see it, soon the defenses of the entire Spanish colonies will be incomparably thorough. I'm an ordinary farmer and Raleigh is a pirate boss, that's a fact. So he probably knows better. Anyway, if what he says is true, it's a predicament. More than anything, the strengthening of Florida's defenses means they've explicitly declared their intention to check us in eastern North America. That is, this settlement becomes endangered. It means we will inevitably clash with Spain someday. Moreover, what about the slaves in Florida? No, it's the same elsewhere. How should they be liberated? No, can they even be liberated? Naturally, casting such questions, Raleigh and I continued our deliberations for a long time. But, while we were spending time like that, someone entered the church building we were using as a meeting room. As the two of us turned our heads,
Ah, Vicente.
were you in the midst of discussing that topic again? Should I leave?
No.
It's fine. Please sit here. Since Vicente also roughly knew the situation as a captain, it wasn't difficult to include him in the conversation. The three of us put our heads together and racked our brains over the current problem. What should we do? The Spanish colonies are becoming increasingly fortified. It sounded like a signal that they wouldn't lose their advantage in America even if it meant accepting a large temporary disadvantage. And to be honest, if Spain properly concentrates its capabilities, there's not much we can do. In the distant future, England or Britain will hold world hegemony, and they'll beautify the era of Elizabeth I and spread various propaganda, like falsely claiming they won the England-Spain war that's unfolding right now, or asserting that their victory in this war caused Spain's downfall and gave them Atlantic hegemony. Of course, that's nonsense. Spain will continue to do well from now on, until they can no longer extort more gold and silver from the New World. Yes, the Spanish Empire is now a hegemonic power shaking the world, and England is just an obstacle on its periphery. And the reason Spain has become such a great hegemonic power is precisely because of the numerous luxuries obtained by exploiting natives and black slaves. So even if Spain doesn't put its full effort into the Caribbean fight, there are enough reasons to deliver a sincere blow once. What we're seeing now was exactly that sincere strike. This won't do. We can't stop here and we can't lose here. There's a reason for the safety and prosperity of this settlement and community. But the immediate reason that concerned me was different. For now, as Sir Drake suggests, finding methods while taking tactical advantages elsewhere.
No.
If we retreat like this, everything we fought for will become meaningless. Walter, didn't you say the Spanish exploitation of slaves is getting worse? That's right. Then wouldn't our fight have merely made their exploitation more intense? Let's look at it coldly. Spain cannot stop the slave trade, because the empire's wealth comes from exploiting slaves. Nor can we achieve the miraculous feat of driving Spain out of all of America, driving out the Spanish from Mexico, and from the distant lands of Peru and Argentina? That's nonsense. I've never thought that far. I'm well aware that the Atlantic triangular trade will continue for hundreds of years. Even my actions so far have been for my moral self-satisfaction, not considering such complicated circumstances. I've never thought I could solve all the problems alone. But, if as a result some people's lives have become more cruel, shouldn't I take responsibility for that? Shouldn't I try what I can do? I pound the desk as I think. If only there was a way. a suitable method to attack the Florida colony. First, I wish there was a way to appeal to the conscience of the Spanish. Walter, can you contact conscientious Spaniards? As if Spaniards would have a conscience. Bartolomé de las Casas was also Spanish. That's true. Suddenly talking about conscience out of nowhere. It might sound nonsensical, but it's one approach. About half a century ago, conscientious Spaniards who couldn't bear the violence against natives, a king who wanted to check those who had gathered native slaves to form small kingdoms, and a church trying to evangelize the natives collaborated to bring about the result of native slave liberation. Las Casas, whom I just mentioned to Raleigh, was also a priest who led the native liberation at that time. Of course, as can be seen from the explanation above, native liberation didn't rely solely on conscience. Therefore, to draw out movements from within Spain, information about internal conflicts and interests is needed. And I wish there were people knowledgeable about the internal affairs of Spain and its colonies. Not knowing how things work inside, we have no methods. Additionally, if we could help slaves escape on their own. Well, think about it for now. I'll also think separately. But no method particularly emerged from struggling alone. I sighed deeply and stepped outside. My neck is stiff and my head is throbbing. I don't even have a clue on what to do. Did you hear? I heard. It seems even Nemo has no solution. That's not it. Raleigh cut off Vicente's words and shook his head. He sees the situation more clearly than anyone. Pardon? What do you mean? Didn't he ask to find ways to collaborate with potential helpers inside Spain? To Raleigh's ears, conscientious Spaniards equals internal helpers because any person of conscience would naturally yearn for the free Virginia that had escaped from slavery and Catholic barbarism. Moreover, he said he wished for someone knowledgeable about Spanish internal affairs. Raleigh is a man who has moved in step with Europe's first intelligence agency. The meaning was clear. He desires an information network. Finally, if possible, he wants Moorish slaves to be able to escape on their own. In other words, he desires an organization to systematically incite and move slaves. Isn't that what European intelligence agents often did? Right away, gather Spanish people and liberated Moorish slaves to receive volunteers. Then, thud. Say, can I also participate? In the direction where Raleigh instinctively pointed his pistol, a frightened Moorish man had collapsed in front of the wide-open door. He had probably been caught eavesdropping with his ear to the door. I am sorry for eavesdropping, but my wife is still not liberated. My wife is across that sea. If you send me to the Spanish colony. A desperate cry. Raleigh strokes his chin for a moment and says, You're good at hiding your presence. Yes, for that, I'm confid. And you speak Spanish. Well, I was born in the colony. Ah, is that so? What's your name? Tayan. Oh, I also have a Spanish name. It's Martin. Raleigh snapped his fingers. You're hired. Chapter 95, Two-Faced Saviors. What's going on? Why is there suddenly such a commotion at the shore?
Ah, Holy Maiden.
Well, people have arrived from Spain. From Spain? They crossed the Atlantic. No, not quite. They came from Florida over there. Eleanor was startled and turned around. Indeed, she could see several small boats and half-naked people among the crowd gathered noisily on the beach. They clearly seemed to have arrived from somewhere far away on small boats. And if they had come from Florida, it must have been an incredibly dangerous and terrible journey. As Eleanor approached, the crowd naturally made way for her. Recognizing that she was an important person here, the trembling newcomers walked up and took Eleanor's hands. PP, please help us. There, Master. Pardon. That person bought us from the slave market in Florida and even arranged ship passage for us to come here. He is our benefactor. The former slaves, exhausted and trembling, pointed to where a Latin man and a tall black man stood, both looking in even worse condition than themselves. Teach that person, whenever there was food, they gave it to us. Oh, Eleanor felt her eyes reddening. As the freed slaves gathered around began taking the newcomers away one by one, the master and his servant, their legs giving out, remained collapsed on the shore. Eleanor brought them water, food, and blankets, and built a fire. Gradually, color returned to their faces. Where is? This is Virginia. Are you all right? Oh, greetings to you, my lady. This is Virginia, you say? Yes, that's right. Hey, Malco, get up and see. We've finally arrived. Master, are you all right? No, I'm fine. But you? The two men grimaced as they raised their bodies, which seemed to be screaming in pain. Those watching them shed tears, clapped, and rejoiced. Of course they would. These men were virtuous heroes who had traveled the hundreds of kilometers from Florida to Virginia. Nemo had worked hard to instill the metric system in their minds, to help slaves escape. It was only natural for everyone to be happy that they had survived. Are you all right? As Hewitt, who had walked up beside Eleanor, asked this, the two men, Asuero and Malco, nodded and slowly explained their situation. They had been a slave owner and a slave in Florida. The slave owners, there were an exceptionally cruel and vicious bunch, but Asuero was different. He would read the Bible to his slaves and even paid them monthly wages as a diligent plantation owner. Malco was a standout among his slaves and served as an overseer. Then one day they heard news about Nemo and Virginia. We heard that there were no slaves or slave owners there, and that its emperor despised slavery and had forbidden it forever. That's when I made my decision to buy slaves and help them escape. Malco also joined me. And so Asuero and Malco spent their fortune to purchase about 10 slaves from the Florida slave market, and together they risked their lives on a daring escape by boat. That's how they had arrived in Virginia. Wow, that's remarkable. Not at all. Our Lord was crucified and died in agony for our sake. How could a person not do at least this much for fellow humans? When Thomas Hewitt expressed admiration, Asuero bowed his head as if embarrassed, and Malco looked at him with satisfaction. However, So all the people we just met were the slaves you purchased later. That's right. They're free people now, of course. I heard that in Florida all pioneers are basically given 10 slaves. Where did they go? At that question, Asuero's face froze slightly, then relaxed so subtly that no one noticed. You seem to know the details of our colony. Well, stories from the South are quite famous. Is that so? Haha. It's bitter indeed that my homeland is known for such injustice. So what happened to? They were all freed by Master Asuero. They all died on the way. Pardon. I freed them and brought them along, but they all died on the way. That's right. Good heavens. I can only pray for my slave brothers. A subtle inconsistency, a hasty exchange of glances between the two. Anyway, this is impressive. I can't just send such virtuous men to ordinary lodgings. I'll lend you my quarters. Thomas Hewitt didn't notice and simply moved past the conversation. Is that so? Eleanor felt a slight sense of discomfort but couldn't express it in words and merely nodded. It was the same when they reported to Nemo. I think it would be appropriate to prepare a new house on Croton Island, especially for those virtuous men. They may become symbolic figures of slave emancipation in the future. Hewitt excitedly proclaimed in the meeting hall. Wait, isn't that too hasty? Eleanor Dare tilted her head and asked. Nemo questioned her. Why do you think so, Eleanor? Well, it's hard to put into words, but somehow they made me feel uneasy. No, thinking about it again, it seems strange to make such judgments based only on intuition. Perhaps I've been too rude to them.
No.
Eleanor is right. Nemo nodded and, as if suddenly remembering, pulled something out of a drawer. Mr. Hewitt, place this in their room as you take them there. This is a small tablet. It's a device called a smartphone. Here, press this button and this button, then leave it in a corner of the room, and bring it back to me tomorrow. Surely you're not going to look into their souls or harm them. There's no such function, so don't worry. For now, we can't be sure they aren't spies sent from Spain. Can we? Well, that's true. So trust me and place it. After paying attention to their behavior for a few days, everything will be confirmed. Won't it? If that's the case. And so, Hewitt guided them to his room and then moved to Vicente's quarters, who had temporarily left for reconnaissance. He placed the smartphone in an inconspicuous corner and collected it the morning of the day after next while greeting them. The contents of the conversation they had the previous day fell directly into Nemo's hands. == 3 hours 16 minutes and 17 seconds. Russell.
Top.
Ah, there you are, master. What master when there are no slaves? Call me by my name. Ha ha ha. How could I do that? You're still my benefactor, aren't you? Just call me Asuero. Or Mr. Javier if you prefer. Mr. Javier, you've worked hard. I still can't forget the wailing of those idiots burning in the basement. Why did we make things so troublesome by buying them? Idiots? They're your countrymen. Hey, countrymen? No way. My family has been selling slaves for generations. If we hadn't lost the war, I would never have fallen to the same level as those creatures. Is that so? Anyway, let's toast. To our new homeland and the new emperor. To the new lord we will soon meet. Fast forward. Beep. 14 hours 39 minutes and 21 seconds. I'm asking just in case, but there's no way that incident will be discovered, right? Of course not. I securely blocked the basement door. Still, you never know? What if they escape outside and make contact with other slaves? Even if that doesn't happen, what if their bodies are discovered? There are traces of torture. Well, they were probably the ones who spread rumors about our new Lord Nemo and incited the slaves. But do they really have the will and ability to conduct such an investigation on us? True, Florida is also Spanish territory. No matter how much they try, don't we just have a life of enjoyment ahead of us? Of course, we won't be able to enjoy hunting or whipping anymore, but, right, that's not what's important. Have you heard about the land area they promised to give us someday? Do you know how much 500 hectares is? Ha 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 ha. I never thought I'd live like a lord here. Congratulations. If you forget me, half of all the property I acquire will be yours. Don't worry. I swear to my lord. Fast forward. Beep. 27 hours 52 minutes and 33 seconds. Drag. Why are you pulling the chair? Just in case someone might be eavesdropping. I've already confirmed there's no one here. Don't worry. Is that so? All right. Now, let's count how great the glory we'll enjoy will be. By the way, it's a shame we can't hunt Indians around here. Maybe we should have gone to Portuguese Brazil instead. 29 hours 1 minute and 17 seconds. And Eleanor? Yes. Please go back for now. I'll think about how to deal with them. Nemo said this to Eleanor with a calm face. But to Eleanor, those two eyes were burning. == After Eleanor left, I was alone. I picked up the smartphone, stuffed it into my pocket, and left the church. After walking a bit, I soon reached my house. Inside, I checked the refrigerator. Beef, in good condition, and for seafood, well, I could get fresh ones on the day and cook them. It might be nice to try Spanish cuisine after a long time. Ugh, I feel like vomiting. Just looking at meat felt like it would trigger hallucinations. I heard their conversation. In their conversation, I heard what they had done. I heard the story of them impaling people to death. I heard the story of them burning people to death and feeding their flesh to their families. I heard the story of them humiliating naked people before showering them with bullets. I heard the story of them, killing people, again and again. This is even more cruel than in the original history. People could be insanely cruel to other people. It means there's absolutely no control. The Spanish colonial authorities, eager to expand their colonies, aren't controlling the settlers at all. when there was nothing to stop them except their own conscience. And when they finally throw away even their conscience and pour out their ugly desires. People could be more cruel than devils. My hands are trembling. I couldn't show such weakness in front of Eleanor. I couldn't show disgust or fear, because I was an angel and had to maintain dignity. But it's disgusting. So disgusting that I want to kill those two right now. And I'm afraid. I'm afraid that they pretended to be virtuous in front of our settlers. I'm also afraid that I almost fell for it. I am an angel. At least those around me believe so, and that's why they follow me. I am an angel. Therefore, I must act righteously, and by doing so, my community remains peaceful. I am an angel, so I must not allow evil people around me. And the single act of malice they committed almost destroyed the foundation of my community. What should I do? All sorts of anguish instantly coil and grow in my head. How should my community respond and deal with such malice? How can we expose and punish the crimes of such evil people? How can my community defend against the insidious attacks of such individuals? And the Spanish colony is operating far more harshly and cruelly than I thought. I knew that many Europeans performed atrocities in Africa and America during the colonial era, but I didn't know it would be revealed so starkly. How should I? Slap. Damn, get a grip. I can't be intimidated and shaken by something like this, like an idiot. The people I'm responsible for now number tens of thousands. If we're going to collapse because of the malice of just two people, we shouldn't have started in the first place. Honestly, even with a clear mind, I have no idea how to solve these problems. The feelings of fear and anxiety still haven't subsided. Of course, if I could single-handedly remove the darkness of colonialism and punish all the evil people in the world, I would truly be an angel. Cannot do that. I cannot solve these problems right now. But those bastards. I will definitely deal with the bastards who have come into my sight. Everything else can be thought about later. When I lifted my head, it was already midnight. Dishes get clean by themselves without washing, and clothes become neat without doing laundry. Staring blankly at that scene, I think, appointments are made at night. I made my decision, and as soon as the next morning came, I called Eleanor. For now, let's invite only that Asuero character to my house in Crotone. He must come alone, like I'm interested in him and inviting him for a meal? That kind of pretext would be good. Then what about guards? Not needed. No, perhaps we should have some troops watching my farm from a distance to prevent him from escaping. But they must be positioned inconspicuously. Yes. Even if not to this extent, facing human malice while running a community wasn't a one-time or two-time occurrence. At times like this, I have ways to respond. Finally, I intend to give them just one chance. I'll handle it myself. With my own hands. Chapter 96. Emperor's Judgment 1. After disembarking from the Nautilus, Asuero shed tears of emotion as he looked around. An impressive coastal fortress and straight, long roads welcomed him. He whistled as he walked on the smoothly paved road that ran through the dense forest. Anticipation. A fulfilling anticipation for the future ahead filled Asuero's entire body. Asuero wept as he remembered the difficult life he had experienced until now. It is the way of the world that hardships befall the righteous, and all manner of deception in the world comes upon the honest. All the poverty and frustration he had experienced until now flashed before his eyes. Born as a child of a poor hidalgo, a lower Spanish nobleman, he had worked as a mercenary for decades until his body was broken, all for the sake of advancement. He had wandered countless times beyond his homeland, learning swordsmanship and whatever else came his way. When isolated from enemies, he had even drunk his own urine. There was no hardship like that hardship. After enduring all sorts of difficulties and migrating to Florida for a peaceful retirement, what did he face? Disgusting savages and slaves so lazy it was abominable. And contrary to what the colonial government had said, there was nothing but terrifying wilderness rather than fertile land. Due to that anger and exhaustion, he, who had been a good Christian, did commit minor transgressions. But now the day had come for all of that to be rewarded. Those hardships created his current days of glory. This way, if you continue walking this way, his palace will appear. Ah, I've been waiting. Thank you, Mrs. Dare. Asuero gave Eleanor an overt, oily smile. Eleanor's expression suggested displeasure, but this only made him feel more pleased. It made him feel like an even more important person. After all, he was a guest invited by the native emperor. Though it was late enough for drowsiness to pour down like starlight, his eyes were bright and alert. He had experienced this kind of thing when making appointments with employers during his mercenary days. Busy people with many responsibilities could find it difficult to make time. So the fact that he and the emperor were meeting at this hour meant that the emperor was that busy and important. It means that I am important enough that he had to deliberately make time for me. Each of Asuero Javier's steps was filled with strength. With each step by step, the house with the green roof in the distance grew closer. Is this all? It was perplexing. No, it was indeed a fine house. It was pleasing to see the neat wooden walls under the well-organized green gabled roof. But it wasn't very large. At least, not large enough to be called a palace. In fact, it was questionable whether it could even be called a mansion. At this size, it wasn't much different from the house he had lived in Florida. Ah well, that's right. He's a savage after all. Snicker, Asuero laughs. He wasn't sure what he had expected. Walls smoothly plated with gold? Or a tower as massive as a mountain? If there had been a monarch in this land capable of building such a palace, wouldn't Spain and England have already been brought to their knees? Surely he was just a native chieftain who was floundering, not knowing what to do with all the gold and aluminum sitting under his backside, living near this clumsily built hut. Knock, knock, knock. As he approached what appeared to be the door and knocked, suddenly there was a sound of metal brushing and singing, and the door clicked open. Looking inside, all was quiet and dark, with a narrow corridor stretching straight ahead. A faint light leaked from the door at the end. An unfamiliar but fragrant smell pricked his nose, and strange-styled walls and decorations filled the surroundings. Asuero entered, feeling slightly frightened. Thump, thump, thump. Mud stuck to the clean floor, but he didn't care. Quietly opening the door at the end of the corridor, a simple living room appeared just like before, and in the middle a small dining table was set. Lobster, grilled beef, and curious stews occupied the table, and a man was sitting behind it, a tall man with dark eyes. He extended his large hand, offering Asuero a chair. Asuero, unknowingly intimidated, quickly sat down opposite him and looked at this mysterious native man. Without saying a word, he muttered a simple prayer, barely audible, and then began to eat. Asuero had thought that being a savage, he might grab food with his hands and chew noisily, but that wasn't the case. He leisurely picked up a fork and put sliced meat into his mouth. Asuero followed him and put beef in his mouth. However, due to nervousness, he couldn't taste anything. His hands trembled. Should I address you as your majesty? He remained silent in response to Asuero's words, only smiling. Your majesty, thank you for inviting me here. I have always had a deep abhorrence for slavery. Then, to meet your majesty who shares the same thoughts as me, I thank the Lord. The Lord? Pardon. Did you say you thank the Lord? It was perfectly fluent Spanish, as if he had been born and raised in Castile. Ah, yes, that's right. Yes, I thank the Lord. For what are you speaking? Well, of course, because the Lord has allowed me to meet your majesty. Something was strange. The shape of his mouth and the words coming from it were slightly different. His mouth speaking Spanish seemed awkwardly like it had been overlaid with someone else's lip movements. Yet the Spanish coming from his mouth was perfect. A sense of fear gradually crept in from that disharmony, that unnaturalness. Yes, this house, the shape of this table, everything was strangely unfamiliar. In this extremely peculiar atmosphere, Asuero was so tense that food wouldn't go down his throat. All this time, the emperor was still just smiling. It's fortunate that you thank the Lord. I too wish only to thank the Lord.
Yes.
Yes. Did you not come to this house alone? Does that please you? Of course. Doesn't the Lord rejoice even when one lost lamb is found? Lost? Lamb? Is this the right metaphor here? Is it a statement revealing that he had been a slave owner who had repented? Or, no, let's not think strange thoughts. By now, bells were ringing somewhere in the distance, indicating that it was well past 11 p.m. 11 p.m. Why had he called him at such a late hour? Was the reason he had originally thought correct? Why did you do it? Here, Asuero's thoughts momentarily stopped. No, it seemed as if the time of the entire world momentarily stopped. The juice dripping from the meat, the leaves flying beyond the narrow window of the living room, the table that wobbled slightly as if not quite balanced, the eyes of the native emperor staring at him. Everything stopped for a brief moment, then moved again. Pardon. Asuero was not a stupid person. But even though he knew what the emperor was talking about, he could only stupidly ask back. No, I don't understand. You freed all the slaves? Why did you come here with such a lie? Couldn't you have just said that you mistreated slaves but had a change of heart? How did he know that? Chapter 97, Emperor's Judgment, 2. If you had, you would certainly be a sinner, a clear sinner, but I would have considered it. And I might have forgiven you. You could have obtained fields and a house in this land and lived happily. No, if we think about why you left Florida in the first place, that wouldn't have happened. No. What's important now is not, how did he know? You were dissatisfied with life in Florida, weren't you? So you wanted to enjoy a wealthy life with the favor of a rich native emperor. From the beginning, there was neither a will to repent nor a conscience in your heart. So all questions are meaningless. What's important now is, how do I escape? You will pay for your sins here, so speak finally. I will give you a chance. I'll give you the opportunity to say that you are willing to apologize to those slaves you locked in the basement and repent for your own sins. Asuero was no longer listening to him. Upon hearing those words, Asuero looked around to see if there were any guards, but the house was quiet with no one inside. There was no one around. I act here. If I can just eliminate the witness here and escape, then I can buy time to safely escape to Florida. Asuero gripped the knife he was holding. Seeing this, the emperor calmly continued cutting meat and speaking. Deceiving me is the smallest of your sins. Your sins are, Aha! He shall pay the price for that arrogance. Asuero rose and repeated what he had done countless times during his mercenary days with the knife he was holding. Instead of meat, he cut a person. Shuck! The knife penetrated the emperor's neck. The emperor's eyes widened with pain, and then, quack-quack-quang. He rose up, grabbed Asuero's neck, and pushed him against the bookshelf. Boom! The bookshelf fell over, and books scattered everywhere. Black frames broke, vases shattered into pieces, and fragments of dishes bounced in all directions. Tables broke, the floor was scratched and dented, and objects all around lost their places and broke. Die Already. And so, during their fierce struggle, Asuero frantically stabbed the emperor's vital points. Despite all that pain, the emperor did not release Asuero's neck, and each time, Asuero, terrified, wildly stabbed and slashed the emperor's body. And, slurp, time was on Asuero's side. After being slammed against the wall and pinned under the bookcase several times more, the emperor collapsed, drained of blood.
Montag-Monster.
I thought you'd die. Cough. Cough. Asuero spat phlegm on the floor, recovering his damaged throat that the emperor had been strangling. It didn't make sense. To endure this far. Is this the kind of strength that gave him confidence to meet me alone without any guards? But he was foolish. Idiot, what kind of emperor would receive a strange foreigner without a single soldier? Asuero hurriedly searched for valuables in the house and stuffed them into his pockets. Then he headed towards the door and tried turning the handle, Rattle. Rattle. It wouldn't open. He had to get out. He needed to leave this house immediately. But where to go? The window. Asuero threw a chair and smashed the window with a crash. Through the broken window, a peaceful, pastoral vineyard was spread out. It's okay. Everything had gone wrong, but it was still okay. Seeing that it was still quiet around, no one had noticed. He just needed to grab a few more valuables and slip outside quietly, and then prove it with those valuables, that he had killed the native emperor, that he had done it. Then the wealth and glory he desired would await him. Now if he could just find a small boat and return to Florida. Gone. When Asuero checked his pockets, all the pottery fragments and aluminum statues he had stuffed in earlier had disappeared. Asuero blinked again. Yong! 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 The bell of 12 a.m. rang. Asuero watched. He watched a miracle. The broken glass pieces floated into the air and then assembled one by one, piece by piece. And the assembled glass was fitted back into the window frame. The fallen bookshelf stood up on its own without anyone's touch. Scattered books arranged themselves and sat on it. The broken frame was filled in, and the cracks disappeared like wounds healing. The head of a broken statue reattached itself. The fallen chair was righted, and the dirt scattered on the floor suddenly melted away. It was as if this palace was alive, as if it was slowly recovering from its wounds. Devil's work. This is. Everything moved as if time was rewinding. If that's the case, could it be? Your greatest sin is not that you deceived me, nor is it even that you deceived the Lord. Clatter. You deceived your own soul. If we say that we have no sin, we deceive ourselves. You drove the Lord out of your heart. The moment he heard his voice, Asuero's thinking stopped. Asuero could no longer move or breathe. Stiffened like stone, Asuero barely managed to turn his neck to look back. On the table that had been shattered to pieces, on the tablecloth that should have been torn, he was cutting meat just as before, as if nothing had ever happened. Yes, he rather wished that all the previous moments had been a dream, that nothing had actually happened. Sit down again. But the emperor said. He said in a very cold voice, "It is dinner time now." Everything in the living room had returned to how it was before midnight. But his fate had crossed a river that could never be turned back. Asuero, having lost even the thought of resistance, collapsed to the floor. The emperor chewed a piece of meat. Yes, meat. Like that meat. I am nothing but a piece of meat. When a knife enters, I am cut, and I am merely a piece of meat that drips red blood. I am a handful of dirt. Just as an ant is crushed under a child's finger strength, I am powerless before him. My life is more worthless than a fly's. That's right. Devil. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. The devil's power. He was a mere human, deceiving those who dwell on the earth and telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword and lived. Revelation 13 verse 14. But he was not human. If he wasn't human, then he must be either an angel or a devil. You who died and came back to life, you must surely be of the devil's power, the devil's beast. No, you must be the devil's beast. The devil's power, devil's beast. Go get away. Get away. Get away. Asuero hastily pulled out a dagger from inside his clothes and raised it towards that strange and extraordinary being who was silently looking down at him. He was not trying to stab him. Lord, please, drive away that devil. Please, please, glory, on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Damn! His hand trembled violently. He raised the dagger held in both hands to form a cross. Power of hell, be gone. Be gone, I say. Please, may this holy form drive away that evil being. Please, I have never been negligent in worship throughout my life. Please, please. How dare you try to violate the low Lord's people? How dare you call yourself the Lord's people? The moment he heard those words, Asuero's head became dazed. He was calmly walking towards him. As Asuero held out the cross made with his dagger, he, "What? I was baptized, and I confess every week. What does baptism matter? And what does confession matter? Uh? He gripped the blade forming the cross tightly. Blood flowed. Blood dripped, falling to the floor. He grabbed the blade and took the knife away from Asuero, throwing it away. Then he proudly showed both his hands. They were clean, as if the cross had refused to harm him. Asuero squeezed his eyes shut. "Look at me." He couldn't bear to look. He had to be a demon. "Look at my eyes." He didn't want to see. He didn't want to see how petty and insignificant he was, reflected through his eyes.
Asuero Javier.
But at that cry, Asuero's eyes flashed open as if receiving a royal command. Ah! And he saw. He was, "You, no, it's not true. You savage emperor, can't possibly." He wept like a child who had sinned. Chapter 98. Breaking of a Man 1.
You, Dede, Vil.
There was no strength in his voice. Go away. There was no conviction in his eyes. He trembled all over as he gazed up at the being before him. The truth was reflected in his two eyes. A man stands there. No, a man? Can one assign a human gender to him? Can one attach a human name to him? He is not a person. He must be either a devil or Asuero, unable to contain the truth in his mind, trembled all over. Fear and anguish that gripped his soul emerged amid the throbbing pain of his body. Only then did the thoughts he had been putting off float up. How on earth did he know? How did he discover Asuero's past? And how could he reveal things Asuero had hidden? No, this too is a foolish question. The truly important question is this. What is this mysterious being standing before Asuero? One who revives from death, and one who sees through human sins.
Sin. My sin.
Asuero is silent. Asuero is silent, unable to do anything. There was nothing more he could do. The native emperor, before his eyes, must be either a devil or an angel. And whether a devil or an angel, the result was the same. He came to me. He knows my sins. He has pierced my soul. I was his. Asuero thought this and wept. Why you are. While weeping, he murmured without even realizing it.
Ade de Vil.
And there Asuero's thoughts stopped. This was a question yet not a question. This was self-deception. Asuero already knew what kind of being the other was. The other could not possibly be a devil. But he wanted to ask just once more, for the last time. What are you to dig up my sins, to speak of my punishment? To this he answers, Nemo, the one who is nothing before infinite and brilliant glory, the one who stands at the feet of the throne, beside the Lord of all creation, and thus the one who lives wrapped in that radiance. He is, and no way, he is a devil. Why you're a devil. A devil. You're a Dadash. He serves the Lord, and he is a devil. He must certainly be a holy being, but he is a devil. He cannot possibly be a devil. Therefore, he is a devil. Thoughts that could never possibly connect become linked, and shocks that could never possibly be endured strike his soul. His reason gradually melts away. Must flee from the devil. Yes, because he's a devil. I must escape before the devil who serves the Lord inflicts divine punishment on an evil person. Me? An evil person? That can't be. But devils inflict divine punishment on evil people, and I am an evil person, so I must flee. Tormenting slaves is a serious crime. But all I did was torment slaves. I have sinned, so I mustn't be punished. Because I am an evil person. The Lord loves evil people, and the devil loves righteous people, and the devil created all things, and the Bible was written by the devil. The sea surges upward and the sky plummets downward. Stars swim like fish, and fish shine like stars. Thus he staggers to his feet in this tangled world. As he crawls out of the living room on all fours, the sound of someone following with footsteps, thump, thump, comes from behind. No, it's the devil's footsteps. I must flee. Strangely, even though running on all fours should surely be twice as fast as walking on two legs, I cannot escape from him. Ah, that's right. That guy was a devil. He must certainly be flying with the angel wings on his back. Then I too must rise. Because, did humans originally walk on two legs? Having risen like that, Asuero hurriedly rushes to pound on the front door. But the steel door doesn't budge an inch. After pressing various buttons and turning levers, luckily the door opens with a click sound. Asuero swims through the darkness, moving staggeringly through the gap in the door. I'm not sure if I'm walking properly. The ground seems to be turning to mush. You, Asuero Javier, repent. If you repent, hell will move away from you. Looking up at the sky, clouds were baring their teeth and rushing to devour him. Filled with fear, he bends his waist and quickens his pace again. You sinful Asuero Javier, you should be afraid. Be afraid of hell. Be afraid of your sins that summon hell. Looking back, the angel's figure is nowhere to be seen, and numerous dark-skinned Moors are running towards him. They are all his former slaves. They wail, "Torture that man. Torture him as he tortured us. If not, if you fear becoming righteous, you, Asuero Javier, will suffer eternally." Other people run after him. They are natives. They chant, "Tear him apart, mock him, humiliate him. Let us return to him as he tore, mocked, and humiliated our souls." All those wails and chants and laments and sighs and tears and thundering voices pierce Asuero's ears. Every dirt floor he steps on turns into black charcoal. From that charcoal, terribly hot flames sprout like grass and pierce his feet. All mountains look like towers of piled skulls, and all forests look like seas of surging lava. The power of death hangs over your head, and if you do not repent, you will fear the punishment that comes after death until the day your breath ends. The voice of the angel, no the devil, no the angel chasing after him, strikes like lightning in Asuero's heart. Wings sprout on the shoulders of the native emperor, no the angel. The trident in the angel's hand transforms into a grotesque shape and pierces Asuero's entire body. Is this a hallucination? No, that can't be. It's too painful. Ugh. Aya. The world blurs with tears. It blurs with gray and rainbow colors. He cannot properly distinguish the world. He gets hurt in the bushes, his feet catch on stones, and his body crashes into tree trunks. Still he walks, because behind him the devil, no, the angel, the angel is chasing, because he must flee forever. He walked, firmly gripping his half-crazed head amidst a world that appeared only faintly. The angel's voice continues to ring in his head. His judgment approaches you. Be afraid. Be afraid. His shouting overturns the entire mountains and valleys, and his mad laughter makes the sea boil. Asuero Javier must flee. He must flee forever. He must walk and walk and walk forever. But he will never be able to escape from the clutches of that devil who is an angel. Everywhere was noisy. The whole world was in turmoil. Equals. It is quiet here, but it is filled with tension. Eleanor and the other soldiers waiting at the entrance to the farm stare in bewilderment at the scene before them. That terrible murderer, that shameless deceiver who pretended to be a righteous person, was staggering towards the gate. And behind him, he was just watching him from a distance. Asuero was like a ghost rather than a person. His pupils shook in all directions as if chasing an invisible vision, and he shook his entire body as if swimming in darkness. Chapter 99. Breaking of a Man 2. Lord, not dead. I'm not an angel. Devil? Hell? Repent. He convulsed, and he just quietly watched that sight, without saying a word. Whenever Asuero turned around to look at him, he would suffer, grab his hair, and pull it out clump by clump, as if the mere sight of him caused an electric shock. The soldiers, who were on guard because they didn't understand the situation, unconsciously flung open the gate when he signaled. Asuero staggered out through the opened gate, still with unfocused eyes, endlessly chanting, "An angel." One of the soldiers raises a gun and attempts to shoot. It was understandable. As far as everyone knew, that guy was an extremely cruel human butcher. Thinking this while trying to light the matchlock gun. Swish. Wait! His hand, rushing urgently, blocks the hasty soldier. As the soldier feels awe and extinguishes the fire, he said to the soldier, "Judgment is not our role. What happens next is his own matter. Anyway, he can't do anything now. Don't worry, everyone." At those words, everyone made the sign of the cross in silence. Meanwhile, Asuero was gradually moving away. He continued to chant and stagger, heading towards a place that wasn't even a road, until he became a small dot in everyone's vision, until he finally disappeared beyond the horizon. What do Europeans of this era fear most? Based on my careful analysis, it's hell. Specifically, the fear that they might experience endless suffering in an eternally burning hell. That makes people go mad and also makes them desperate. Even if they aren't that devout, as long as they aren't among the very few atheists who face execution the moment they are publicly exposed, they basically believe in the existence of God in this era, don't they? Before an ordinary believer of such an era, I appeared as an angel, and I revealed his deep, hidden sins. I thought that Asuero Javier would at least submit to me, or perhaps have a change of heart, but he collapsed in an incredibly absurd way. Spouting all sorts of nonsense, drooling, alternately crawling on all fours and walking on two legs, showing all sorts of looks, he completely disappeared. I don't know if Asuero will regain his senses or survive safely in this strange land. But as long as he thinks of me as an angel, he will absolutely never become a threat. For now, the problem has been solved. Moreover, it was good that I didn't kill him directly. He is an outsider and his crimes also occurred outside. Unless we have the capacity to judge all the crimes and injustices in the world, we can only handle matters within our own community. If we had accepted him as a member of our community, I would have properly put him on trial and sought an appropriate punishment. But that wasn't the situation. Asuero was not yet a member of our community. It was an area that couldn't be handled by our laws. And what if I had ignored the legal system and fair procedures, and killed him in a moment of anger? How would our community members have responded in the future? Wouldn't they have sought to wage war immediately, saying it was to stop all the injustices in the world? It wasn't the time for that. Not yet. So, outside the realm of law, I did the best I could. I attempted to talk to him, and when he refused to talk, I asserted my authority. And he left our community on his own feet. The side effect was much more certain than I had thought.
No.
There was a more personal reason. I didn't want to usurp God's name and condemn a person. I didn't want to directly judge him either. This was completely different from killing people in war or killing people in self-defense. Yes, it was a completely different matter. In that sense, perhaps I am hoping that he will recover his senses. To recover and repent, or at least to receive punishment under Spanish law. Anyway, what I need to worry about right now is not the story of a murderer who has already disappeared. What I need to worry about is the situation in the Spanish colony. From what I've heard, it seems much more serious than expected. Especially Florida. Soon, the actions of those fraudsters were exposed throughout the colony, and that freed slave named Malco, who had been working with Asuero Javier, also vanished. However, the shock that arose as their criminal actions became known still had not subsided. The cruel colonial policies of Spain, which had been widely spread from England for propaganda purposes, had all become prophecies, just with the target changed from natives to black slaves. Bacon, after hearing our recording, shut himself in his room, saying he would write a detailed report to the home country, and even Drake, who occasionally visited, became serious-faced. Because the reason Florida colony became like that was Because of our existence, Raleigh said with a sneer. They fear us, so they are hastily implementing a policy of colonial expansion. As a result, they cannot internally control even the worst elements. Slaves make up 80 to 90% of the population, and a small number of Spanish pioneers monopolize overwhelming force. The colonial authorities lack the capacity to monitor those pioneers. People who were randomly selected came to a strange world with overwhelming force. A situation where such people receive minimal supervision and control. Eventually, unless one of us or them disappears, this situation will not end. Raleigh is right. There are only two answers. Either Florida crushes us, or we crush Florida. I walked out after finishing dinner with Raleigh, lost in thought. Now, I need to change the plan. We must now move beyond passive responses like helping individual slaves escape and freeing them. At first, it was just because of my conscience. I couldn't just stand by. I was only adding small acts of help. But given how things have turned out, I can't just stand by. We must strengthen our capabilities and weaken the enemy's capabilities. Until Spain's Florida colony is completely broken. Yes, we must clearly break Florida. Chapter 100. Hunger and War 1. How much expansion has been achieved? The Seminole tribes allied with us are celebrating their victory in war. Soon, it will be nothing to control the entire Florida peninsula. Good. Excellent results. First, let's bring in more slaves to cultivate the land. For a long time, a plague that had killed countless people began to spread from Florida. This time, it wasn't about smallpox or other diseases spread by Europeans. Of course, the Spanish colonial policy ignited the flame, but the disease itself was not something that even the natives were experiencing for the first time. We must go north. If we don't go, everyone will starve to death. Then shouldn't we submit to those tribes? Will they accept us? They lack food just as we do. If they also lack food, they will find a way too. The first plague to arise was named hunger. Those in Florida who refused to ally with Spain were defeated in wars with Spain and other tribes and were pushed northward. It was an unprecedented upheaval. A population of a scale never seen before began to move simultaneously. Naturally, tribes pushed from their lands couldn't leisurely pack their corn and peas and flee. Some were killed as adults and absorbed into other tribes, while others barely escaped, maintaining the lineage of their tribe as they fled northward. Please, accept our tribe. If we accept them, our own strength will be reinforced. Food is scarce. A path could open for us too. If a path opens, yes, with these numbers we can stand against the forces in the north. Aren't the Muskogee tribe also sharpening their knives? Now is the opportunity. You're right. Select a new war chief. The tribes that fled this way became carriers of yet another disease, igniting a new fire in the north. The second plague to arise was something very familiar to the first plague of hunger. It was war. People replaced arrowheads, gathered stones that fit perfectly in their slings, and sharpened spear tips to be more pointed. As vegetable gardens dried up and hunting grounds became barren while mouths to feed increased, this was a natural result. And kill them all. No. Rather than killing, focus on the beans and corn. If we retreat from here today, we all die. Blood soaks the dried furrows of fields. Crack, crunch, thud. Skulls are broken and brains scatter on the ground. Intestines spill out, bones and muscles protrude, and skin is torn off. Like starving beasts fighting, desperate and terrible battles spread like epidemics or wildfires. Northward, and northward again. Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and to Virginia. Scholars of the future would define that the Catawba and Tutelo tribes use Siouan languages, and most of the tribes of the Great Virginia Confederation use Algonquian languages. Language, as always, is an important issue. Those who speak the same or similar languages, those who share ancestors, can communicate and unite more quickly than those who don't. The same thing happened among those who suddenly lost their land and collapsed. There, The lands spread around Chesapeake Bay are the only wealthy lands even in the midst of this turmoil. They offer enormous gifts to the great chief, but in return, they receive enormous amounts of food. That's why so many people have survived through that long famine. So, we too must go there. In order to survive, dozens of tribes driven north gathered, their chiefs gathered, and the great chiefs they served gathered again. Then how? Other tribes in that area won't welcome us, will they? They will surely kill us. No, we must kill them, by any means necessary. We must open a path to that wealthy great chief. If not, the great chiefs briefly look at the other chiefs. They see the flesh beneath their bellies gradually drying up. Outside that tent, the crying of a child who had been crying from hunger stops. Another one has died. If not, everyone will starve to death. Hunger brings war, and war brings hunger again. The Catawba and Tutelo tribes, with thousands of warriors, invaded the land of the Tuscarora tribe. They were the largest group among those who offered tribute to Chesapeake. They fought for days, and all died. Thus one tribe disappeared. Ha! What's wrong, Mr. Hewitt? No, fox furs are scarce. That was the item the Tuscarora tribe brought the most. Because the Tuscarora tribe hasn't sent envoys. Vicente, do you know the reason? I have no idea. The exquisite cycle created by the devil rolled smoothly, staining the American continent with blood and scattering bones on the ground. That's how history moved, desperately biting and being bitten for survival. That chain eventually reached Virginia. The Spanish Empire had clearly designated us as enemies. And we too were in a situation where we could no longer stand by and watch the Spanish Empire's colony growing in this vicinity. Whether for survival or for moral reasons, everyone in the settlement learned about the situation in the Florida colony. They impaled people and burned them. Good heavens, such ugh! The English, having been exposed to a lot of anti-Spanish propaganda for a long time, denounced the immorality and cruelty of the Spanish. And the Algonkins and other natives who had been living with the English and heard their angry remarks about Spain also felt disgust. The Spanish expressed regret as well as shame and anger at the behavior of their former homeland, which had become so corrupt. Finally, the freed slaves. Could we have become like that too?
No.
Not could have. If this place falls, we could become like that any time. They were afraid. Thus, many tribes speaking mixed languages united with various angers and various hatreds. Frankly speaking, it was the moment when the Virginia community, which had no commonalities except faith in me, came closest to being united for the first time. Fear, hatred, and anger, like a similar dew, negative emotions swirled and kept the settlers' hands and feet busy. How many cannons remain in the coastal battery now? Out of 210 in total, about 70 are available. We must strengthen the defenses of Croton Island more thoroughly. Transparent shields. We're short on transparent shields. We're also short on gunpowder. We need to expand fertilizer somehow.
No.
With farmland rapidly expanding, fertilizer too? Rather, let's find a place where saltpeter is available. I know. Nemo? Is that true? Yes. For now, let's go south of Croton Island together. Manteo, prepare the ships. First and foremost, preparing military force was the top priority. The freed slaves, terrified that their former masters might enter this land and create a living hell at any moment, advocated for strengthening the military. Most other groups agreed with this. If Spain were to land a large fleet here, we too could suffer tremendous damage, or in the worst case, we could even be defeated. At least, that's what the settlers believed. I thought the possibility of a Spanish invasion was low, but I didn't think it was bad to increase Virginia's military power either. Our community clearly needed more strength. This small settlement with only this population had to face the threat of a huge empire with millions of people. They worked hard to make more guns, more ships, more gunpowder. Military training became more frequent, and gradually, there were fewer and fewer settlers who couldn't properly shoot a gun. So we rushed forward diligently. First of all, the issue with Spain was a matter of survival, and matters of survival were more important than anything else. So I thought this trend would continue in our settlement for a while. Aren't there tribes whose communication was cut off? Yes, Manteo. There are tribes whose gifts suddenly stopped. They've returned. What happened? But I was wrong. And they are requesting settlement. Perhaps thousands will gather. What did you say? Because another problem began to pounce on us. Natives from various regions began to pour in again. Please accept us. We have no more land to stay on. The Chowanoke tribe, the Morituk tribe, the Pamlico tribe, the Sakota tribe, and many other tribes I didn't even know the names of. They migrated in tens and hundreds every few days. They are tribes that served me as the great chief, and they have maintained gift exchanges with the Virginia community for a long time. The sight of them, all exhausted from hunger and injured, asking to be accepted by the great chief was devastating. Just organizing a list of these people into a chart was a task, but first it was urgent to treat and feed the injured and hungry people. Eleanor and other medical volunteers moved breathlessly, and administrative officials with tablets also bustled about, trying to grasp the current state of personnel. And then the result was, injured people, big or small, make up about 10% of the refugees. There seems to have been and in many places. Manteo, if there was war, why didn't they report to the great chief? As small as the role of the great chief might be, I understood that he at least oversees matters related to war. To my question, Manteo answered, they probably tried to report, but collapsed before they could. That means, yes, it seems foreign tribes suddenly poured in unbelievably. Due to the simultaneous collapse of tribes, there was confusion. Foreign tribes poured in from the south. Usually, group migrations occur due to food shortages, and the south, having a milder climate than the north, has more abundant food. So while invasions from the north would be understandable, invaders from the south seem a bit strange. The Spanish are expanding the Florida colony down there. They seem to feel threatened by the Virginia colony. So be careful, as there might be trouble from the south. Clearly, when we first met, Drake had said something like that. Considering that was a year or two ago, the influence of the Spanish movement seemed to be just now reaching here. Goodness, it gives me chills. I don't know how many times our colony has staggered just because the Spanish decided to expand the Florida colony. It's from such people that we must survive. Anyway, as my expression worsened, Manteo cautiously answered. And, above all, the situation in the south is not looking good. The south? You mean where the newcomers who have invaded this area are? Yes, it seems we should prepare. Prepare. For some reason, Manteo's words felt hollow to me. A few days later, when the council was held, the identity of the emptiness I felt was clearly revealed. The Catawba and Tutelo tribes that have newly taken over the land of the Chowanoke tribe have expressed their intention to submit. What?
Impossible.
We cannot let those cruel ones into this land. That's right. They are devils. Devils, I say. Great chief, please destroy them. Please kill them. The current situation was not a disaster of a nature that could be prepared for. Just as an ant cannot prepare for a landslide. First, we had to receive it with our whole body.